been so long. I'm graduating 34 this year.
Awesome.
Maybe they're not this year.
Hey, all in your time, my dear.
But everybody keeps
When you're ready.
Okay, we are now live, by the way. So anything happening on this side is now being streamed. So please act accordingly.
Fundraiser for the court right now.
Okay.
I got more with a hobby. I got information that I found. I love this resource. Good. Sorry, I was. Huh? I only have like 50 of it. I thought it was just gonna be a table where they could go buy and fix it. Sorry. We'll do every other chair. Huh? Okay. I thought it would be like that's okay. Thanks for all of your game playing last night with all of your computers. Because when they 20 minutes, when they really don't, when they touch me, that's how you know maybe 20 minutes.
Oh yeah.
Okay, we're actually live right now, so be careful. We are live right now. Like right now. Yep, we have 2 people who've already tuned in. So, wow. Nice. That was really nice. Thank you. And now they've tuned out. So thanks. Hey, sweetie.
Are you okay with that?
No, because that looks like it's all about.
So, he's really heartbroken. I texted him.
You're way behind. This sucks.
Yeah.
Miss Annie, one of our viewers said you should tuck your shirt in. All right, let's get this. We need to get this going. I don't know. I think we're good. We're actually good. Like I said, people are watching already. Yeah. But this brings in another for the future. If we do this, we have to stay on time. Because right now we look like we're, here it is 8:50. 8:53. You can speak. It's volume, so.
We're screaming about get up outside the new way. Hello. Can you hear us? I'm the pretty one. It's so they can hear us.
Yeah, they can hear you.
I'll introduce yourself.
I'm Charlie Westwood of Portland. Yeah.
Great.
Don't you have titles?
Rosa number 60, reading 44.
Thank
How
you.
old are you?
27.
And you're 30 and 27, and they're both. How long have you been dating Portland and Seattle? How long?
4 months.
4 months?
I know.
My hair is about to pop up. Okay. That was me from Seattle and Portland. Come here, Hawaii. Come here, Daddy. Ah. All right. This is. Introduce yourself.
Oh, everyone else, Hawaii.
Hawaii. Thank you.
5? 5 what? Awesome. So, Andy, one thing real quick.
Arizona, come up here. Arizona.
Yeah. I just realized something. So when we move that, look now where it sits. We need to move that up. We need to move this closer. Look how
All
far
right,
it
so
is
we
again.
have here Arizona. Put your little come up here, yes. This is Arizona. They're kind of gothic. So what is your name?
Sergio Delatrico.
Oh, I like that.
Shutting up.
I go there. Your name?
Yeah.
This is my copy.
Might be.
You're not taking on. They're from Arizona. What year are you? 2013. 2013. All right, give it a little wait for the people.
Sorry about that. We're going to move it up a little bit.
Here. Here's my husband and fiance. All right, so this is an emperor of Sacramento. Introduce yourself.
Yeah.
What do you have? Look, we're on the internet.
Oh my gosh. Hey
It
guys.
used to be Nathan on that. This is very new.
My name's Rocky.
And what number are you? What number?
I was just coming to find Santa Claus. No, I'm number 44.
Sacramento. Welcome.
So when Rocky came on, viewership went up too. So I think he did something right.
What are your requests? We have a request hotline. All right. Thank you, Rocky. Come here, San Francisco. No, we're still with the Oh! Oh, that's right. We're gonna call you up in a second. All right. Okay. Oh, someone actually does that type of thing. Oh, okay. What's your name? Yes, from what show. And what number are you? Oh, that's right. And you're the resident emperor of San Francisco. All right, computer, come here. Homosexual. And what is your name?
My name is Ken Harper and I'm the greatest in San Francisco. I'm MGM and I'm the ring right there.
All right, and what reign are you in?
46.
46 years. Very good. And you and I are the honorary members of the Munchkin Society. I am the mayor of Munchkin. All right, thank you. Come on, Texas. This is what you call a pre-show. See, you know. All right. And what is your name?
I'm Gogo Bear, and I'm gratitude running for Houston, Texas.
Oh, very good.
Because you know they grow up big in Texas.
Yes,
Don't mess with Texas, because I'll come out.
All right. Thank you. Come up here. Oh, we will come up here, Daddy, with your son. Where are you from? I guess I'll say that. All right, Anthony, thank you so much. Oh, this is Duncan. Duncan's in the military. What rank? Work extremely high. What are you? Oh, you're in the Navy. Currently, aren't you a chief? You will be a chief. All right, thank you for your service. All right, the pre-show is over. How about us?
All right. I'm enlisting you. We're going to move this up like one more for better view.
Okay.
So get on one side of it. And just move forward. 1, 2, 3. I think that's going to be the best we're going to get. I don't like.
Good morning, everyone.
Huh? No. But so we had everything on the floor, and then of course it moved up. Now we're adjusting.
We will get started.
Yes, we are. They should be queuing it up. I think they're getting the flags ready. That's why I told him, I said, if you turn this on, it's not late. You can't do that. People are like, oh, I don't know, you should just turn it off. So, you better start every
On this side? This it right here? Annie? This?
Grand Duchess, you are in the shot right now. And your president just made a couple interesting comments about your behavior. I'm kidding.
Is she Skyping in from
She's watching.
She likes to do that.
They're like,
Good morning, everyone. Just before we get started, I know that a lot of you have received the surveys. We ask that you wait until the end of this focus group to fill them out because your perspective might have changed by the end of it.
Such a pro.
Or not, or it may just reaffirm. So we're going to start in about 30 seconds. If those of you, if there's anyone in the back sort of hanging out, we are really going to start, so come make yourself at home and grab a chair, and we'll get things underway.
Good morning, everyone. Buenos dias. Welcome to the International Court Conference. We know there are going to be people joining us throughout the morning because some people probably are still in Charlie's or other places.
Yes,
Or the Flex Complex.
this might be the last spot on the bus tour. I think that it would be probably prudent for us to just tell you briefly who we are. Don't worry, you will not hear our biographies as much as we might like to share them for each other because we're proud of each other. But my name is Tony. I'm the 28th Empress of Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. And I have the honor of sitting on Nicole's privy council, which for those of you who don't know what that is, it just means she takes my calls. And this handsome gentleman with me is?
Hi, I'm Russell Roybal. I'm an Emperor San Diego and co-founder of the Imperial Court of Washington, D.C.
We wanted to start by these meetings. I think that we want to just evoke a spirit today in this room. One of the fact that these meetings can become contentious. There's passion, there's commitment. Some of you have been involved for 1 to 50 years. And with that comes a lot of caring, and that caring can manifest itself into sometimes disagreement. And what we want to really suggest today, and I'll let him talk about, Russell talk about this, is that just we remember that outside of there, we have a lot of enemies, a lot of detractors, and a lot of people who would wish us to not have the successes that we have and the ones we want, and that we should try to remember that we should, at the very least, remember that we tend to agree on more than we disagree, and that when we disagree, we can do it agreeably.
That's right, Johnny. And so we want to remember why we're here and why all of us have joined the court in the first place. I know for me, 5 years ago, I received a court scholarship while I was in school, and that gave me the introduction to the court. And the court has been in my life ever since. And one of the things I think I learned in the court is that we welcome everyone into our courts, no matter who they are, no matter who they love, no matter their gender, sexual orientation, race, ability, everyone is welcome in the system. And I think that is something that we should all be proud of. And one of the things that we show to new court members is that we're very respectful to them and to each other. And so we want to just go over some group agreements today, which is that number one, we'll be respectful to one another. That we have one diva, one mic, even though there are 2 mics up here. But if you are speaking, make sure that you don't speak over someone else. That keep in mind around stepping up and stepping back. If you are a person who tends to speak a lot, like me, and you have opinions about everything, make sure that you are conscious of the space that you take up in the room and encourage other people who may not be as extroverted as you to participate in the conversation. Land the plane. Lots of us like to hear our own voices, but it's important that we're not sermonizing, so no sermonizing, and make sure that when you get to your point that it is concise, and then you land the plane.
And anyone who starts their remarks with, "in my year," owes me a tequila.
That's right, Jim. Raise your hand or your placard when you want to be recognized to speak. And then just be conscious of time. We have a lot to get through today. The agenda is really jam-packed. And so we want to move through that as quickly as possible, but really have great discussion, etc. So
Also being heard, please do speak up. This is a high ceiling, and when you please speak a little louder. It's okay to be a little too loud within reason, and please announce at least the first time if you're speaking. Just quickly say your name, your city, and your title of choice, just so we know who is giving us the feedback. And I think that about covers everything.
that's it, Joni.
All right, now we're gonna have fun. We're gonna move through. This is a very ambitious set, and we're gonna do our best to get through things. Also, remember that as facilitators, we are here to keep everybody on track, moving forward, and not to infuse our opinions too much in this. So we're basically going to be trying to stick to that. We apologize in advance if we have to be cut off because we have to move along. Please, with all due respect, we will have to do that at times. We're going to have a timer.
Yeah, the timer's right there,
And with that, I think let's move it along and save ourselves some time. What would you like to do next?
We're going to start with the national anthem, or the national anthems of the United States, Canada, and Mexico. We're going to start with the Canadian national anthem, then go to the Mexican national anthem, and then finally the anthem of the United States.
Please rise. I'll keep our land boys for you. Oh, and now we stand on guard. That was fun. For a minute, I thought my last drink from last night. Okay, well, let's move to blessed Mexico.
Thank you. Let's hear it for the flag bearers.
Seeing as we're not going to do biographies, I'll just say this about, and you can add your own remarks as well. I met our next speaker 25 years ago in Seattle, Washington. At coronation, I was the Imperial Crown Princess of Vancouver, and she was the reigning Empress of San Diego. And the Emperor stepping down that night, his name was Daniel, he's a handsome gentleman, and tonight he's stepping down as Empress of Las Vegas. So it's been a wild ride. I was told that day that if I was going to meet Nicole, that I should behave myself and not talk a lot. I didn't do very well on either of those counts, but nonetheless, we've been friends ever since. And for you, why don't you bring Her Majesty up here?
I want to welcome to the stage Queen Mother 1 of the Americas, my mother, who, actually, Nicole doesn't remember this story, but I met Nicole because at my university, we used to have an annual fundraising drag show. that she came. And if you've ever seen Nicole perform, she does only like 3 songs. And what she did was called Save the Best for Last by Vanessa Williams. And, you know, sometimes, you want to do that with me? Sometimes it's smooth. It was an amazing move. So the Dream Girls review, which Nicole ran, and the court raised a lot of money for my university and my campus LGBT group. And we did political organizing together, and she has been not only my mother, but my political mentor. Please welcome Queen Mother, One of the Americas, Empress Nicole Green.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone, and happy Hanukkah. Yes, that's right. Happy Hanukkah. This is the last day, isn't it? The last Hanukkah day? Yes. So I expect all of you to leave the presents at the door for me. Okay. I want to acknowledge the hard work that has been put into this conference from the following individuals. Emperor Kieran Keegan of Canada, Empress Precious Carlo of Sacramento, Empress Cookie of Washington, D.C. She has her fan club in tow. Empress Scott of Ohio, and the co-chairs, Crown Prince Nathan Page, who's done an outstanding job, and Grand Duchess Annie. I see you have things for nuns, okay. As well as Empress Helen Twelvetree. Thank you so much for your help. The very first gathering of the Imperial Court was called by our founder, Empress Queen Jose, in the 1980s and was held in San Francisco at Pinocchio's. How many remember Pinocchio's? Pinocchio's. And it was covered by The Advocate. There was a major article in The Advocate about the gathering of the courts. This was one of our first national media attention. Decades later, Emperor Larry of Reno organized a court conference in Palm Springs. Parliament was established and 7 sessions were held to bring together our courts for dialogue and to hear the voices, opinions, ideas, and to get input from our membership. As you know, I've traveled throughout the United States, Canada, and Mexico this past 12 years of my reign, and I've listened to many of your concerns and criticism and suggestions. Next month, Emperor Juan Carlos and I will have the honor of crowning the first monarchs of our 70th court chapter in Florida. In my travels, the top concerns seem to be about the future of our courts and getting new membership. Many feel that our imperial courts are not what they used to be and may soon close down. But this is the reality. And that is a reality that we all need to face. The times have changed. Courts are no longer the only game in town. As countless, and it's a good thing, gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender organizations, societies, and clubs have emerged. These changing times have also reduced the membership of our fellow fraternal organizations, the Elks, the Shriners, the Knights of Columbus, and other organizations, but not their charity work. Social media has indeed changed the world. Yes, some courts are thriving more than some, but all of our courts are continuing to make a difference. Think about it. Every week, there is 1 or 2 or 3 court events happening. We are constantly raising money. I was just in Ogden, and like I always say, there are no small courts or smaller city populations. And Ogden raised more money that reign than they ever have in the following reigns before them. So, and I see this all over. I think we knock ourselves too much. It's like, oh my God, we're not. No, you are all making a difference of dollar at a time, and you are affecting lives. You are changing lives
and making your organizations and charities thrive. It hasn't stopped. So stop hitting yourselves and saying, oh my God, no. We know that changes are coming, and so we have to change with the times. As I stated and issued a proclamation, I believe the future of many of our court chapters will be courts without monarchs for every year. Courts have already proven that they continue to be viable and productive without reigning monarchs every year. It's always been about our membership. We do not have to have an emperor and empress on a throne, keeping the throne occupied just to do our work. We can do it without monarchs. Not to say that we don't want to have monarchs, but let's be honest, some of us are scraping the barrel just to make sure that our emperor and empress is on the throne. We don't need to do that. Courts have already proven that they can continue to be viable and productive without reigning monarchs these years. It's always been about our membership. I believe our courts should focus more on female membership, transgender membership, straight and heterosexual membership, people of color membership, and yes, younger membership. All of these that I've just mentioned in my travels, I see that they are lacking in many of our courts. Some courts have maybe 2 women members, but our community is called GLBT. So focus more, look at your own court, go, what is missing in this court membership? And then thrive to make them feel and reach out that they are welcome. Many courts' female membership is still very small compared to our male membership. Look at this room. It's an example. Today, we will rightly focus on our annual coronations, which honestly have a majority become one hot, boring mess. Many lasting 4, 5, 6 hours. Now, I want to ask all of you, we all go to other communities, galas, and events. You have never, I know, HRC dinners, Canadian equality, whatever the dinners or galas are, none of them last more than 2 hours. Yet ours lasts 6, 5, 4 hours. That's insanity. And that's what's stopping. You know what I do? I told you this, I will go to, someone will say, this is someone's first coronation. I'll go, who is it? I'll go point, and I'll go to them, how do you like this? And they, oh my God, this is fabulous. The costume they put on. At the end of it, I go, how do you like it? If they're still there. And then they go, I'm never coming back. And I go, why? And they go, well, when are you going to introduce the taxi cab drivers or the Uber drivers that brought everyone here? You introduce everyone. It is a problem. And San Diego has to have, and hey, we're not on mute to this. Oh, please, can I just buy a table and not have to come? You know, that's pretty bad, girlfriend. You know, so we're going to focus on this, and there's a survey. Probably the most important thing is this survey. And it's online, is it, Nathan?
It will be online.
It will be online. This is very important. Look at some of them. How many command performance do you think? 2, 3, 4, 5. How long should a coronation last? 3 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours? Should salutation greetings be discontinued during court walks? Yes, no. One title, one walk? Yes, no. Is it okay for an MC to use profanity? Yes, no. There's a lot of good questions there, and we will give the results. But we've got to focus on this. We must change or improve our coronations, or soon we'll be the only ones there. Now, how many times we've had MCs say, would the out-of-town courts please assemble in the back? And the whole room gets up. You know, that happens a lot. There's only, a couple. So I hope you will focus on that. This conference is about you, the membership. But I wish to say, at this time, that I know that I'm not a perfect leader. And I know I have my own faults, and I'm not sometimes the most positive person. But I want to give you all the opportunity you always have to let me know exactly how you feel. And many times you do. So, the truth of the matter is, I'm going to end it there because I had a long speech, but I really want to hear from you. My outlook is this, that we are doing the work, as I said. When I come to your coronation, I marvel at what you're doing. That has not changed for the last 53 years. You continue to do that. I am so proud of you. You should be proud of yourself. All we're trying to do is let's improve our organization, definitely the coronation. And I believe that we can and we will be here 50 more years. Maybe not as big, maybe not as many monarchs, but we will still be doing the charity work. And you know why that is? Because you all have a heart. You have a devotion, and you know, through all the BS and even, people started criticizing this conference before it even started. That's gonna happen. But you wanna know something? You also know that day, at the end of the day, after you've had your toy drive, the end of the day after you fed to the homeless, the day after you visit some people in the hospital, you know why you're involved in the court system. That's what we all share. Thank you very much, and God bless you.
Thank you. Let's hear it again for our Queen Mother, Empress Nicole. Thank you, Nicole. For the speakers that come up, we're going to start with the history of the International Court Council and the Imperial Court System and the Ducal Empires. As everyone, we want to know about our history. As Nicole often says, a community that doesn't know where it came from doesn't know where it's going. So there are going to be a few people from different parts of the United States, Canada, and Mexico to talk about the history of our beloved system. And we're going to start that with Emperor John Carrillo. From the San Francisco Leather Court. As the speakers come up, I just want to remind you we have a lovely timekeeper who has, give a timekeeper a little who has signs. Let me see your signs. That's 5 minutes ish. And that's stop. Yellow, proceed with caution. Red, stop. Ready, John? Welcome.
Thank you. I'm not used to hearing my name pronounced right. Thank you. And coming from San Francisco, don't worry, you don't have to use the red flag. We know how to stick to our timelines. We'll see. But greetings and great warm welcomes and salutations from the Mother Court of San Francisco. I'd like to start off by thanking everybody involved, as Nicole did, by putting together today for us. Your hard work should definitely not go unrecognized. And I'd also like to thank everybody in the court system who has assisted us in capturing our rich history and is assisting you in capturing your rich history. Gathering information in each court and is what is factual is not easy as you can imagine. But all the stories you hear are definitely very entertaining. Today I share with you a short version, and I apologize in advance if there may be errors in the stories captured, but it's going to be a shorter version of what we originally wrote. I'd especially like to thank Emperor 14 after Norton of San Francisco, Matthew Brown, for the version that I'm sharing today. In 1963, San Francisco gay bar owners and Jose Sarria founded the Tavern Guild of San Francisco, organizing club owners and club patrons to stand united and fight against growing police corruption, raids, and arrests of gay club owners and patrons. In 1964, at the Bar's Ball that was hosted by the Tavern Guild of San Francisco, Jose was crowned Queen of the Ball. Jose later said, "We're all queens. Why become a queen when you can become an empress?" Thus, he proclaimed himself Empress of San Francisco and later proclaimed that he was the wife of the late Emperor Joshua Norton. The Tavern Guild refused to allow him to go around in female attire, so he dressed up in a suit tie, hat, and a variety of necklaces, and jewels and some hints of makeup to attend various functions. He and his courtiers held court as he was the empress. In 1965, Jose founded the Imperial Court of San Francisco. The Tavern Guild was the original owner, and the empress was the official hostess. As in any organization, the start was a little rocky, but Jose held firm and had a privy council and was formed to govern the office of empress. Based on the European royalty, various areas of San Francisco were known as colonies or enclaves, where serenas were appointed to oversee the areas of San Francisco such as Polk Street, the Castro, the Tenderloin, and the South of Market area. These serenas and former empresses and other individuals served on Jose's privy council. In the years that followed, Jose led the Imperial Court of San Francisco, modeled after his early political activism and street-level organizing to educate and cultivate a greater community, a sense of gay pride, identity, and unity. Electing empresses at the Tavern Guild's annual Arts Ball became an annual event that drew audiences in growing numbers. In order to vote, you had to buy a ticket to the ball, so contestants solicited votes, and the person with the most votes and admirers at the ball was elected and crowned empress. The visionary Jose recognized the success he had in his Imperial Court of San Francisco and had united the gay community of San Francisco. In the years following the founding of the Imperial Court of San Francisco, Jose worked to expand his own vision and began working with prominent drag queens, gay community leaders, and activists outside of San Francisco to share his vision on a greater united charitable community. By 1969, Jose set out to expand and create the Imperial Courts across North America, modeled after the Imperial Court of San Francisco. In 1970, Jose and the Imperial Court of San Francisco helped establish Imperial Courts in Vancouver, BC, Portland, Oregon, and Seattle, making them the first Imperial Courts outside of San Francisco. Jose and the Imperial Court of San Francisco would go on to empower and create over 35 courts in the decade that followed. Jose then spent 2 decades expanding the growth of the Imperial Courts and empires across North America. By 1995, the 30th anniversary of the founding of the Imperial Military Court of San Francisco, under Jose's leadership, over 60 courts and empires have been established throughout the United States, Canada, and Mexico. When the concept was presented to the Tavern Guild of membership in 1972 by a committee to elect an emperor, it was defeated by its supporters wanting the empress of the Tavern Guild to remain more social, feeling that an emperor was not needed or wanted. There was a strong underlying reluctance to embrace some more masculine and sexually oriented bars from South of Market in San Francisco that were supporting the creation of an emperor. The committee decided to proceed on its own, separate from the Tavern Guild. John Gazelle met with Jose and asked him to crown the new emperor of San Francisco on the final election night that was scheduled in September to commemorate the commemoration of when Emperor Norton declared himself emperor in 1859. Jose accepted and became a member of the committee. On that night, Gil Hernandez, known to the gay community in San Francisco as Marcus or Mr. Marcus, was elected the first emperor after Norton. Even though the two groups commingled in certain aspects, the emperor and empresses of San Francisco existed separately until 1983. Jose continued his nurturing work with both groups, serving on the boards of both emperors and the Imperial Court system and empresses. He also assisted in merging the two groups, the two titles, in 1983. He finally, at that time, realizing his dream of a united Imperial Court of San Francisco. Although San Francisco did elect its first emperor not until September 1972, the first elected emperor of the court system was crowned in 1971 in Long Beach, California. The same group of men that was formed in 1972 took Empress Jose in 1976 to the Woodlawn Cemetery to visit the gravesite of her late husband, Joshua. That's where the plot is, where she rests peacefully now. This was to become the annual pilgrimage where the elected emperor of San Francisco takes his oath of office and the day after his election. Those of you that have visited us in San Francisco have hopefully joined us on that trip, painful trip at 7 o'clock in the morning. The emperor and empresses had separate coronations, as I mentioned, until 1983, where they held a joint coronation and the first election of the emperor and empress jointly. There's so much more history beyond that. As I said, I wanted to share a shorter version, but that is the short version of the history of San Francisco. An additional part that we want to recognize in San Francisco's history, that Shenango mentioned, is at the coronation in Seattle, Washington in 2017, Mama Jose formally handed the leadership of the organization over to Queen Mother Nicole. And here we are today. Thank you for your time, and you'll hear more about the other courts and everything else that went on. Thank you.
Who learned something new in John's remarks? Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Oh, I didn't know that the first emperor of San Francisco was crowned when the day was it that Joshua Norton had declared himself emperor. Yeah, that's interesting.
Thank you. I want to take a minute to introduce our other guests on the dais. Emperor Rob Surreal, President of ICC, and Emperor One of the Americas, Terry Saidi. We want to continue with our historical narrative perspective and welcome from the San Francisco Ducal Empire, Grand Duchess Land O'Lakes. So, do you want to hear something shady? So our court formed in 1973. That's usually the history that we tell everybody is we formed in 1973. But the truth of the matter is the founder of our organization, H.L. Perry, actually started proclaiming himself as Grand Duchess in 1971. And the group didn't actually form until 1973. So he sees the history a little bit differently when we say that we've been around for 46 years. He says, no, we've been around much longer. But that is the actual history. We formed in 1973, and here's the shady part, okay? So, H.L. Perry ran for empress a few times, and he didn't quite get it. H.L. Perry says that the main reason is because he was a bar owner, and he was a member of the Tavern Guild. And the Tavern Guild had a lot of power in San Francisco, because they were really the group of bar owners that control the gay community. They really did. They were able to get liquor in and out. Like, it was a very important part of the city at the time, especially when people wanted to shut you down all the time. So their influence can't be underestimated. But it's funny because one of the former Grand Duchesses once wrote a history of the ducal court, and she said what really started the ducal court was when Jose gave H.L. Perry a title that she did not agree with. She felt it was beneath her, and so shortly thereafter became Grand Duchess. And as you can imagine, here's the shady part, is that if you have two empires in the same area, you can imagine there's going to be friction, right? So San Francisco started as an independent court and remains an independent court. So our monarchs are elected annually through the public, just like the imperial court. So there's a lot of similarities. The only difference is that we stand very independently. And so the funny thing about it is that in 1976, okay, from 71 up until 76, really the ducal court was not recognized as a part of the imperial court system. That didn't happen until much later. But in 1976, Jose Sarria sent out a proclamation stating that the ducal court of San Francisco was separate but equal. So for the first time, the ducal court got recognition. Of course, this was after H.L. Perry left the organization. So whereas a lot of times the imperial court, we get a lot of
a lot of love and respect to the founder of Jose. In our organization, we respect H.L. Perry for all of his contributions, but we also understand that our court came up as sort of like a rebellious court, you know? We were starting our own empire within an empire. So there's always been that, but you know, we get along pretty well. So from 1976, we entered into the international court system, and we like to always say international court system because we are not imperial, we're not an imperial court. So when we talk about us as ducal, sometimes it's very confusing, and I want to clear that up just a little bit, that our monarchs are actual monarchs. So when we need an empress, then a lot of times they have ducal courts beneath them, and it gets very confusing that our monarchs are monarchs just the same, and I want to clear that up. And in 1998, we added another ducal court, and that ducal court is the ducal court of Alameda. And again, the struggle was real because there's the Alameda Imperial Court and the Alameda Ducal Court, two separate entities that continue to exist. We're a rebellious sort. But one of the great things that I say about the Ducal Court is that we have persisted. And I think that's one of the important things to remember about courts is we persisted, and about 10 years ago, all of a sudden our membership continued to increase, and we had to set up mentorship programs because we have so many people that keep coming into our court. And whereas we hear a lot of times about the waning membership among courts, we're not really in that situation. Our court keeps growing, and this last year we raised over $100,000. And our duty duchess were both cisgender women. And so we just keep seeing this rise within our court, and we're very happy to be a part of the international court system. And Colette actually was the one that really wanted to bring this information to you, but I'm her substitute. She said, bring the youth, and I'm like, I'm so old. I'm not really bringing the youth, but I'll try my best. So that's our presentation. It's small, it's short, but our history's been long. We have we used to have London in Canada. I don't believe that they are, I believe they've become imperial at this point, right? They're now an imperial court.
So there are dual courts exist.
There is currently 2 ducal courts that are still active. Only the 2, San Francisco and Alameda. But at one time we had some other ducal courts that were going strong. But unfortunately, as times go by, we are the last standing.
Thank you, Linda. Moving right along, we're going to move now to the reigning Emperor of Portland, Emperor Daniel Surreal. He's also the International Court Historian. Welcome, Daniel Surreal Fox.
Thank you, good morning, everyone. Daniel Surreal Fox, Rose Emperor 42 of the Imperial Sovereign Court of Portland, Oregon. 11 years ago, I started a massive undertaking, which was to document and record the entire history of all 95 chapters that have ever existed over the last 54 years now. The history of our beginning begins with a set of men in 4 different cities who began organizations of their own right and their own mission to do something to create change. They weren't thinking about a court at that time. They were colorful men who loved to dress up, they loved to play the queen, play the role, but their mission at that time was really about the social change and the embracing of those community members around them. People like Ted North started the first gay businessmen league in Vancouver. He started the first sporting league in Vancouver. He started the first founding of Vancouver Gay Pride, what would eventually become Vancouver Gay Pride. Jose Sarria, the same thing with the CIRD, the Society of Individual Rights. In Portland, Oregon, you had David Hamilton and Richard Meyer, who started the Prudence of Portland, which then grew and formed into the Portland Forum. And then in Seattle, you had people like Peter Wichard, Del Greenlee, John Graham, John Scott, and John Verdella, who, as part of the Dorian Society, took the Northwest pageant queen of the Queen City of Seattle and turned that into the Queen City Tavern Guild, very much like the San Francisco Tavern Guild that Empress Jose had helped found in the early 60s. And it was through this time, because we have to put it in the context. In 1969, after a decade of their political, social activism, there is no cell phone, there is no email. These men were people who knew each other through their mutual trips and association, through their common interests. People like David Hamilton came every year and would bring the tribe of Portland to San Francisco for the annual parties. Ted North started coming down to San Francisco in 1964 and would bring people with him. It was there, actually, in 1964 in San Francisco that Ted North would meet David Hamilton. And to reference who these people are, David Hamilton is the 6th Rose Empress of the Imperial Sovereign Rose Court. He would put Ted North in drag for the very first time because Ted saw this massive power and appeal that drag queens had with their audience at that time. That their message, when they stood up and they spoke to the room, that people stopped and they listened to them. That they wanted to follow this fearless leader who would get up and say, we're not going to stand for this anymore. We're going to change things. Things are going to be different now. How we arrive at a system today is this. People like Ted North, David Hamilton, people like Del Greenlee, John Graham, John Scott from Seattle, Jose, John Brazell, all of the Tavern Guild in San Francisco. They're all putting on their annual parties every year. The Northwest pageant of the Queen City in Seattle. The Imperial Court of Canada, as Ted North had proclaimed it in '64 after he came home. The annual spring and fall ball of the Portland Forum and the Rose Queens. And the San Francisco Beaux Arts Ball. These events were the precursor to what would become the annual coronations of the first courts that ever existed. They are what gave your 3 terms. You cannot have a court system without cities that associate with one another. And every court has their own history as they proclaim it. And we don't dispute that. For Ted North to say he proclaimed himself Empress in 1964 is the history of Vancouver, BC. Portland, Oregon proudly proclaims its history as having begun with Rose Empress I, Sam Campbell in 1958. Seattle proudly proclaims their history as far back as 1968 when they crowned the first Northwest pageant Queen City with Bobby Calicote. And San Francisco proclaims their history having begun with Jose at the Beaux Arts Ball in 1965 at the Ice Arena on October 31st when she was crowned and proclaimed herself Empress I of the city and the state of California. To create what was an annual affair, they took their charity parties that they did every year, and they weren't just social parties. They weren't about trying to raise money. Their mission was, I want to bring in 1,000 people tonight and throw the greatest party the city has ever seen. And out of that, I hope to turn those people into the people that are going to march with me the next day when we say we're not going to put up with the police raids on the bars anymore. We're not going to stand for being kicked out of our homes because we're gay and lesbian, bisexual, transgender. I see a lot of confused faces. If you have any questions, you can stop me at any moment while I'm saying this. And what
what made it an official court system as we've documented, is when we finally took our parties that we were doing every year in Vancouver, Seattle, Portland, and San Francisco, is we started finally allowing the community, and not just the queens themselves, to have a say in who would be the elected leader of the court for the year. It all began with the match really starting in 1971. San Francisco crowned 5 empresses at their Beaux Arts Ball, chosen that night amongst the room. It wouldn't be until 1971, with Absolute Empress 6, Crystal, being the first elected community empress, that really lit the match, that we're gonna have an official court system. Because then that October 30th of that year, Olympia won. Scotty was crowned in the Spanish ballroom of the Olympia Hotel in Seattle. And then 2 weeks later, after that, November 14th, in the Hoyt Hotel, Rose Empress 14, Tracy St. James would be crowned. And then 2 weeks later in Los Angeles, at the Beverly Hills Hotel, Lorraine would be crowned Empress 1 of Los Angeles. And then just 4 months later in March, the city of Vancouver, BC, would crown and elect Empress 1, Charity Regina of the Dogwood Monarch Society. And that was the match that lit it. Those 5 courts electing empresses within this period of a year would lead in the next 10 years to another 40 courts forming by 1980. And then by 1995, as John already told you, we had hit over 60 chapters at that point. And throughout our history now, in the last 54 years, we've had 95 chapters across Canada, the United States, and with Tijuana in Mexico. We've raised over, according to everything we've documented, we raised over, between all 95 chapters, almost $28 million that we've donated. Your local scholarship programs, your food banks, HIV awareness, prevention, and education. And that is the story of how our court system began, with these very central figure men who started organizations not with a mission of becoming a court, but what transformed into a court because they saw that through their pageantry, their wonderful parties, that they could create a social environment for a greater purpose out of just doing drag. The 1970s is our decade of disco, dance, drugs, and a lot of sex. The courts transformed themselves in the 1980s to become the Marines when the AIDS crisis hit our country. It was the imperial courts who, over that decade alone, raised almost, in 1980, and I think this is an outstanding figure. In the 1980s, the imperial courts raised almost $6 million alone for HIV awareness, prevention, and education. The 1990s, courts transformed to become the major civil rights activism with workplace protection, housing rights, voting rights. In the 2000s, the imperial courts have taken on to be the major campaign lead with equality with marriage. And in this new decade, I believe that is what the court is really still searching for in 2018, is what is all chapters' mission? And I think that is still something that the courts have yet to decide. What this decade will be defined is what their major goal and their mission is. And hopefully today, by meeting, you will come to a greater consensus on what exactly the decade of the teens has been for the international court system. So take that, and if you have any questions, I'm certainly open to that. Thank you. And I'll just close by saying also, I'm a huge archivist. I have a little over 1,900 coronation pins, a little over 1,400 coronation programs. I must have probably 10 different totes of campaign t-shirts, posters. The history will not be forgotten. The reason why we've undertaken this is because our mission is that
All of you who've dedicated decades and years of your lives to making the difference in your communities will not be forgotten. And that's why we do the International Court System Archives. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. One of the best pieces of advice I ever got from Nicole was that in order to create history, you should write it yourself. And so Nicole wants to take a brief moment to talk about a project that the ICC is working on.
I think, am I wrong, Daniel? But Karina's here. Actually, the first empress in Los Angeles was Victoria. And then she abdicated, and then Lorraine became empress. Is that correct? Yeah. Yeah, she was first runner-up. Yeah.
You could wait for a day.
Yeah.
And still be empress.
Yes, and Victoria, so is recognized as the first empress, isn't she still? Okay, here's the great news we're gonna need. Charles from Denver, the Crown Prince of the Americas, has agreed to help underwrite and raise money for a book on our court. We've talked about this for decades. That, as Russell said, is better that we get this done. So you're going to write it. So in other words, what I would like, and I know that Daniel will be working with us closely with it, that if you're for instance, I would see Daniel writing Portland's or Scott or whatever, who's there, but that your boards and colleges pick out one person, hopefully that person is knowledgeable, but even if they're not that old, but they know when to sit down. It's the writing, the priorities that the person you pick knows how to write well. And so we want all the courts to pick out someone in the next year where you'll be a focus in 2019. And at the end of the year, that you have this written up so we can put this book together.
Thank you. And now to give us a little history on the Canadian courts and a Canadian court perspective, please welcome back Empress Jody.
It's fortuitous that the history of Canada and the Canadian perspective were following one another. So I'm going to give a different overview than I was originally going to give, and I'm going to roll them together because I think the history basically set up the perspective. So I guess I'd start by saying that there's no greater love affair, and it is a love affair, than between the courts of Canada and the United States. Since the 1960s to the 70s and the 80s, the 90s, and up to today, people have been going back and forth over that border, over and over and over and over, to share friendship, to share fundraising, to share community building, and to share friendships and love. And it really is one of the most incredible stories of our history that somehow these two groups, and then with Mexico as well, but that these two groups have just embraced one another. We're very different countries. You have a president, we have a queen. You elect congressmen, we elect members of parliament. We have universal health care. And I pray that you're next. As Daniel pointed out, there is no way to discuss the Canadian experience without talking about Ted North. One of the sadnesses I have is that for many, they remember the disputes that we had later in his life. I had many. Ted and I would yell at each other in public meetings on occasion, but it never changed the fact that, and my respect and deep admiration for him. I live on Barclay Street in Vancouver. In Vancouver, we don't just name the streets, we name the lanes. And my living room window looks out onto Ted North Lane, which was proclaimed by the city of Vancouver for his philanthropic work and his work as a pioneer of the LGBT plus community. It was just done in the last several years. And I have a picture to show you of it, actually. So it is important to remember Ted and to remember him, not for our disputes later on, and there were many, but he was fiercely, fiercely protective of his emperors and empresses and court members. And I remember him fondly. Sadly, he left us, as has the first elected empress in Canada, Charity. What's interesting is that, to speak again of the love affair between Canada and the United States, Charity, after she reigned as empress, relocated to Seattle, Washington, where she was proclaimed Empress Emeritus of Seattle. And I do believe that to this day, I could be absolutely wrong, but I believe that she is the international empress. I don't know if someone offhand that has reigned in both countries. I could be wrong. Diversity is a big part of the Canadian courts. Calgary elected a woman, second empress, right out of the gate, Dina Maria. Vancouver followed suit. In the 80s, Easter Arms Michalak, straight woman, born in the United States, came to Canada. Straight woman, woman of color. She reigned. She went on to found a Loving Spoonful, which is one of Canada's premier nonprofits that continues to feed people with life-threatening illnesses, particularly HIV/AIDS. There has been, the Court of Surrey has elected, I believe, 10 women in their college. We have, throughout the country, people of all shapes and sizes and beliefs. And I know that in the United States, much of what our courts we are more similar than we're different, but there are some subtle differences. I know that there are still courts in the States where the emperors must present male and the empresses must present female in terms of regalia. Well, we toss that right out right from the get-go. In Canada, there are, you can't define what an empress looks like or an emperor. There have been drag queen emperors and drag queen empresses. There have been trans women who have served as emperors and empresses. So diversity is very important. Also in Canada, we're very cognizant of the fact that if you ever go to a Canadian function, they'll start by a blessing where we thank our Indigenous people and our First Nations for being on their land, the unceded territories of the First Nations people of our land. Another thing that Canadians and Americans share as history is we are all immigrants, each of us. So we're very proud that in Canada, we have elected multiple Indigenous First Nations people to the titles of Emperor and Empress. And in many cities, they also have their own societies. In Vancouver, we have one called the GVNCS, the Greater Native Cultural Society, which is elects chiefs and princesses that are all First Nations and Aboriginal peoples. One of the interesting history, how many of you have given or received a half title, Empress and a half? Do you know where that comes from? It comes from Calgary and Edmonton. Calgary and Edmonton are both courts in early courts in Alberta, and they were very good friends, and then suddenly things got a little terse. There was too much competition for a while. It seemed like the courts weren't getting along, so they decided to start a tradition of that the monarchs would name half emperors and half empresses. In the beginning, the monarchs in Edmonton would automatically name the half monarchs in Calgary, and the half monarchs in Calgary would name the monarchs in Edmonton as their half to show solidarity, to inspire friendship. From there, Calgary and Edmonton also started giving out permanent titles together, ultimate titles, which are to this day. An interesting story about Calgary. Before HIV/AIDS hit, Calgary had decided that they wanted to do more than just have a party, and they wanted to start fundraising. They went out into the greater community to try to find charities they could give money to, and almost universally, the big charities of Calgary said, no, thank you. We don't want your money, we don't want to be associated with you, we're fine without you. Can you imagine? A bunch of volunteers wanting to raise thousands of dollars and nobody would take it. Well, one group did, Children's Wish Foundation in Calgary, said, we'll partner with you. You can put our logo on your posters. And Empress Barry Ross started a relationship that continues today. Every year in Calgary, they give money to the Children's Wish Foundation, as they will this year, over 40 years later. An interesting part of Canada is Toronto. Toronto came booming out when it did, and it changed forever the entire map of how we are with court systems. It was very West Coast before that. Everything, we talk about the relationship with Calgary and everything, but for quite a time, there was travel very much for Canadian courts within Canada, but Toronto started the East Coast. And today, you see it very differently, that there may be Canadian monarchs who may not travel to Vancouver, but they'll travel to Washington. You'll find that, it's really changed the trajectory of what's gone on. Some important things to note about Canada that you may not know. One of the most important things is that, unlike many of the courts here, we cannot give tax receipts. We are third-tier charitable groups, so we cannot give a tax receipt to someone. So when you hear that a court in Canada has raised $50,000, it was harder for them to do it. One of the other things that is important to note, because sometimes you may look at when in the States there's a national strategy, for example, to support the Matthew Shepard Foundation. When you see that a Canadian court isn't participating, it's not that they don't want to, it's that the laws state that we cannot send our money out, not even can we not send it out of the country, we can't send it out of our own province. So what you'll find is when there have been times like that, we will find organizations like organizations that people like Mrs. Shepard know about in Canada. So that's an important part of the perspective as well. It's also vitally important, I think, to know that it's very expensive for Canadians to participate. Airfares in Canada are dramatically more expensive. For me, this trip, I went to Calgary first because it was my father's birthday, and then I flew down here, and then I'm flying to LA for a bit of a vacation after this. My flight to Calgary was $250. My flight from here to Los Angeles was $39. So it's quite expensive, and how many Canadians in the room? And there's many here as well that probably were on the bus tour last night. But for those of you that are buying a ticket to Coronation this evening or bought one, it's $75. It's $100 for us. It's usually been about an average of about 25% on the dollar. So what I can tell you that is probably the most important thing is that in these times that are increasingly difficult politically, and in times when we don't have, where we have worries that some of our freedoms might go away, and that we have worries that we will go backwards instead of forwards, I think that it's really wonderful that Canada, the United States, and Mexico have this wonderful, wonderful, funny, strange little organization that has been coexisting and showing that it's best to celebrate the things that we can agree on as opposed to focusing on the things we don't. I'm sure I missed a lot of things, but I'd like us to be able to get back some time today. If you want to, I encourage you all, if you can, go to a Canadian coronation. And don't just go, let them know you're coming. If you do, they will roll out the carpet for you. Someone will come and get you, someone will take you back, someone will buy you drinks, and someone will make sure you get laid if that's what you want to. So, yes, you can, Nicole.
So are you telling me that, I gotta be confused that, like when you come here to the United States, like all the Canadians that are here, that they pay more money for the ball tickets?
They're not charged more money, no, of course not. And it's because of the Canadian dollar. So when I go to get money to come here, if I take out $100, the exchange rate is about, over the years, it's been as high as 37%. And of course, it had to happen when I was reigning in 1999, 2000. It cost $137 to get a Canadian to get 100 American. Now, some really wonderful people in those days of many of the courts used to sell us ball tickets at par. to help offset the cost for the Canadian courts. Now, I'm not suggesting that that's something we need to talk about today. I'm just saying, be aware when you see a Canadian and they walk into their ballroom, if the hotel was 150, they're paying 200 because that's the money they make per hour. So it's just important to always remember that. So if you see a Canadian, pat them on the back and thank them for coming.
So I get very confused, I'm getting too old. So Canadians do pay more for ball tickets? No?
So in other words, I didn't buy my ticket yet and I have to. I will pay $75 this evening, as everyone does. But in Canadian money, had I paid in Canadian, the equivalent of that would be $100. Do you understand what I mean?
So you pay in American dollars?
Yeah, when everyone comes to Canada, they get Canadian dollars, and when we come down here, we use American dollars. So it's nobody's fault, it's just something to be aware of. And when you come traveling to Canada, look at all the savings you'll get. So I think we can move along now. If you guys have questions, Dion's here from Calgary, Jason's here from Toronto. We have, you know what, and I wanted to, this is what I should leave it on. We talk about inclusivity and everything. I talked about Dina Marie when we started, the second Empress of Calgary, elected 1978, I believe. Today, Calgary this year elected another woman, the reigning Empress. Introduce yourself to her, you'll like her. So we have a reigning Empress, cisgender woman from Calgary. So come talk to us. We're happy to share our experiences with you. And with that, I think we're going to move on to another experience. We're going to, well, perfect. I think we're going to do the women's perspective right now. I'm looking forward to this. So please put your hands together for Empress Cookie von Sugarworth. Justin Cobb.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning. Morning.
Thank you much for that. Good morning. Quick introduction for those who don't know me. I am Absolute Empress 5 of the Imperial Court of Washington, D.C. I am our nation's capital first cisgender empress, from, again, grade 5. I want to take a second to thank a couple of people. I want to thank Her Majesty Emperor 2014, Dustin de Cobwebs. She was a huge help on this presentation, as well as the year. And I also wanted to thank Rob Surreal. He helped me a little bit on the timeline that was given to all of you. So thank you, Rob. It's been an exciting year for women within the court system, as well as across this country and around the world. The International Court System was founded in 1965. 9 years later, we had our first female cisgendered emperor in the Imperial Court of the Emerald Empire. 3 years later, we had our first cisgender female empress from the Imperial Court of Santa Monica. I'm the fifth empress in the Imperial Court of Washington, D.C. for reign 5. Come to find out, in New York, it took 27 reigns before they had their first female empress. Connecticut, it was reign 16. So interesting how some courts, right out the gate, they have an empress that's a cisgendered female. Some courts, it takes them a little bit longer. This year, the year of the woman, we've had significant strides for women. Similar to the year around us, we have seen an increase in women leadership across the entire court system. Monarchs, we have some here in this room. ICPs, Imperial Court of Washington, D.C. has had several female cisgender ICPs. Cisgender, biological females.
And that's called what?
Cisgender. Cis.
I've never heard of that. I just.
That's okay. As well as many women have taken on leadership roles within their organizations, their prospective board chapters. Many courts, have you seen across social media, have been highlighting the impacts of women made both in the Imperial Court system as well as across their communities. You've seen a lot on Facebook and in social media. You're the woman. And you'll see an entire biography of women within the court system and the amazing work that they do within their chapters, as well as their community. As well as if you've seen some profile photos with the Year of the Woman logo surrounding it. That was actually a fundraiser that went back to impact female charities around the court system and our prospective brands. We've also seen many chapters celebrating women with events impacting community organizations within their respective within their respective realms, as well as highlighting the impacts women have made in their respective courts. Buffalo had their second women's event celebrating the achievement of women within the court system. I highly recommend if you get a chance to go. Buffalo does an amazing job on that event. Again, highly recommend you can make a trip to Buffalo for that event to check it out. Texas has also held several events highlighting the achievements of women within the court system. One of the really exciting things that we had this year is the first award dedicated to leadership of women within the court system was presented in Washington, D.C., the Tony Atkins Leadership Award. Very exciting to have that presented. But no, the court was founded in 1965, and in 2018, we now have an award for women. So it's taken us a while to get to where we are. Some of the things that we've noticed as well is we had a great energy coming out the gate at the beginning of the year. We saw women being highlighted on social media. We were hearing a lot about what women were doing, but there was a little bit of a fall off as the year went on. It tends to happen, but it was something that we began to notice. But the one thing that I really want to highlight and stress to everybody is in this year of women that we've been celebrating, many women still do not feel that their voice is being heard and that it's valued. They don't feel that they have a seat at the table. We've heard women say that their thoughts, their feelings, what it is that they want to express isn't being heard either within their respective chapters or across the court system. And that, again, in this year, it's kind of concerning. Somewhat of a mirror image of what's going on in the world around us. There's still women, even in this year of women, we've seen so many women elected to government positions. There's still so many women who are afraid to speak out. They're afraid that they remain silent out of fear of repercussions, that they're crashing the party. I believe at my very first conversation with you, you asked how I felt being a member of this court system, and that's what I said to you, that I felt like that I was crashing the party. It's been 44 years since our first female monarch was elected, yet women are still afraid to speak out and to speak up. Why is that? So how do we change this? I'm not here to preach to you. This is a collective dialogue. The document that was handed out to you, the timeline, it's just a mere snapshot of the many accomplishments women have made around the world. It shows the many things that women are capable of in politics, in science, technology, in their own communities. We need to remind ourselves that we need each other. It isn't one gender against another. We all joined this organization for the same reason, to improve our communities and to stand up for social injustice with emphasis on equality. If you take one thing away from the Year of the Woman, it should be that we are all equal, our voice is valid, and we all can impact change. It is our duty as an organization to be open and welcome to everyone, including women, be it lesbian, transgender, non-binary, and allies. We need to be open to new ideas and opinions, and we are going to continue to move forward. If we're going to continue to move forward, I think that's a theme that you've been hearing today, is how do we move forward? It's being open to those new ideas and opinions. It's going to take each and every one of us in this room, and those of you online as well, all of us across the ICS, because change begins at the local level. I'm going to repeat that. Change begins at the local level. So in closing, I hope you return home to your realms and you share with your chapters what you've heard here today. It's gonna take everybody working together to make progress happen. You'll notice something at the end of the timeline, that there were 3 days that were left blank with a question mark. Yes, there's gonna be a quiz later. When are we gonna have our first female president of this country? And something that you've spoken about, when are we gonna have our first female queen mother and king father? I'm gonna put a bug in your ear, how amazing would it be if they reign together? Let's put that bug out there. This is our future. So when the clock strikes midnight on December 31st, the Year of the Woman isn't going to end. It's only just begun. And so you can see we have big plans ahead of us. I want to thank you all for your time and attention today. I want to leave a little bit of time if anybody has any questions or anything that they would like to add. But again, I just want to thank you all so much for your support over this next year and your continued support as we move forward. Because again, Year of the Woman hasn't ended, it has only just begun. I want to thank you all so much.
Anyone have any questions or thoughts? Please, when you take the microphone, please say your name, what city you're from, and your title.
All right, I'm Caden, member 43 of Salt Lake City. When you mentioned on the question marks, are you referring to Queen Mother and King Father of the Americas or of different states?
Of the Americas. Okay. Good question.
Hi, I'm Chris 36 and 40 from Orange County Appeal Court. My question is, back in 2010, I hosted a women's conference where one of my main focuses was transgender, because I felt that it was more important that they were more women than myself personally, and I have much respect for the transgender community. And so my main focus was that for that conference. My question is why can't we incorporate a yearly women's conference within every realm just to connect within our local women's groups so that we can report back to maybe one specific leadership that's hosting something. I think it's important to keep all of the women connected, and if each round does it, like we do a coronation or any other charity event, that we could maybe tighten that bond and keep us all connected and on the same level.
I think that's great. There's actually a women's conference that's held in Cincinnati every year. There have been others that have occurred over time, but that is something that has been continually talked about, either one in every respective realm or one main one. That was something that we've talked a lot about this year as well. All chapters are encouraged to host one. So it's great to hear that you've had one. I know there's been one in Connecticut and in Cincinnati's held one for, how many years has it been? 6. So again, I would recommend for everybody as you go home to your respective chapters, coronation weekend, think about holding not only a women's conference, but a transgender conference or any sort of conference that you feel is applicable to your core and issues going on within the court system. And I like your note about finding a way to report back to one respective person with all those issues and concerns so that we can address them going forward. Yeah, exactly.
Hi, Grand Duchess Kylie Leno with the Ducal Council of San Francisco.
Good morning.
Good morning. And when I reigned, was so blessed to have so many cis women who were true sisters to me and worked so hard. And in our court, we've had several wonderful cis female monarchs, both dukes and duchesses. And my question is, and I constantly try to think about this myself, but do you have advice on how the boys club can really be more mindful in what you've experienced, the boundaries are and the barriers you've come up against?
I love that question. And it's a tough one to answer because every court chapter is different. I'm very blessed and lucky that the Imperial Court of Washington DC has always been very open to having women within their system. Again, it took 5 years to elect a woman as Empress. The very next year we had 2 women reigning together. So it's realm by realm. I think the biggest thing, and Dustin, I might grab you to help with this one as well. Think about how you would want to treat your mother, your sister, your best friend, and treat women that you see in the court system that same way. I've experienced inappropriate touching within the court system, and at that time, I was a nobody, and I did not feel like there was anybody that I could go to tell them what happened. And when I talked about women not feeling they have a voice, it's actions like that impact them. So really keep that in mind. Think about your mother, your sister, your best friend, because at the end of the day, we all are in this ring because of a woman. Regardless of your relationship with that person, we are all here because of a woman. And the other thing is, don't be afraid that if you see something, see an action, see something happening that doesn't look right, to step in and say something. To not be afraid to be that voice, because that person may not feel that they have one. The more that we can show outreach, the more that we can show that we respect women's voices, that we respect them as individuals, they're gonna feel more empowered to speak up and that change will happen. Because you mentioned the boys club, well, I'm gonna tell you something right now. We're getting rid of the boys club.
Yes.
When I say that there's a future and that your role is not end at the end of this year, that's exactly what we need. I had to look out for my
Destiny B. Childs, Empress 2 of Washington, D.C., heir apparent and sixth line of succession. One of the things I suggested from one of your questions that Cookie and I discussed this a little bit, and we're working to finish bringing it to our court, is create a women's committee within your own organization. Not just to meet once a year, but meet once a month, even if you just go have dinner and drinks together, just to discuss not only things that have been going on, but ideas that you have that you can bring towards your board. Because if you have a women's committee that is constantly present in your own organization and not just once a year, that's going to help. And Cookie and I, we joke around as the boys club is going away as well. The biggest thing that I like to tell my court, because I am also blessed to be the president of the Imperial Washington, D.C., is everybody's equal. I don't care what your title is. I don't care what your name is. I don't care if you're a drag queen or drag queen. We're all equal. The only difference is where we walk the line in protocol, and that's it. Other than that, we're all the same. And if we all have that mentality and we treat each other the exact same way, that we're all equal, this organization will just continue to move so forward in a positive direction, and that's, I think, what we all need.
One more.
Oh, one more.
I'll refer to somebody else's. My questions after.
Hi, Cookie. I'm Cruzen DeLu. I'm the reigning Grand Duchess of the Ducal Court of Alameda and Contra Costa counties. Just to wrap up really quickly and to sort of tack on to what Kylie said, give us some real world on-street suggestions, what we can do to encourage more women to join our courts. Is it the charities that we choose to donate to? Is how can we outreach? How can we find more women to come in?
Another great question, a very hard question, because again, it's realm to realm. I think the charities that we choose is a big one. The other thing to think about as well is having events that are more family friendly. We have a lot of women in the court system with children. We have a lot of families in the court system now, in general. And so having events to bring those children in, I mean, that's the future right there. But being mindful of the types of events we're having. It doesn't mean change everything. It doesn't mean that we can't be going and having a distributed competition here. As a woman, I may not want to attend. Some of you might. But just kind of be mindful of some of the events that we do, having a safe space for women. Charities is a big one, and family friendly. I think having family friendly in general is something that we as an organization need to be thinking about as well, regardless of gender, because we are seeing more families within the court system, which is fantastic. So I think those are a couple of things that we really think about. And again, creating that safe space. if women see they have a safe space, if they feel that they're a part of it, getting them involved in events on their boards as members of the royal family, they're going to see, and mentoring them, they're going to see that they are a part of it and not just a background player. Get them involved. Don't let them perform and support women as they perform. I've seen some amazing women perform in this organization. Support them in their performances. Because they're just thinking that they're working just twice as hard as any queen out there. I literally hopped up on someone's shoulders once performing, so. Thank you all so much for your attention.
I'm going to briefly harken back to a moment in Canadian history because it bears toward the next discussion that we're going to engage in. I tell this story all the time. It was 12 years ago, and I think we've had 12 years of marriage equality in Canada around that. I went to the Pride in Vancouver. I was emceeing at the main stage, and it was the Pride right after. So there was a huge celebration that people were going to get married. They were getting married, and a couple were married right on the stage in front of like 30,000 people. But one of the speakers that day was a woman named Reagan D'Angelo. She's a trans woman, and she was congratulating our community on this hard-fought war in Canada to realize marriage equality. But at the end of her speech, she pointed out that trans men and women and gender non-binary individuals have been supporting the gay and lesbian movement since time began. And much of the marching and much of the activism and fundraising that they were doing benefited them not in one way. It benefited them not in one way other than to see people that they love find equality and freedom. So I think as we move into the next part of the discussion, we remember that. We should also remember, if many of you will harken back to the days of Bill Clinton, he talked about the politics of them. The people that don't like us very much, always created them. For a while, it was Black people. For a while, it's Latino people. For a while, it's gay people. There's always a them, and the them is the bad thing that's scary. In addition to immigrants being the them of today, our trans brothers and sisters are the them of today. They are being characterized, attacked, and politicized as the new them. And I think that is incumbent on us as we reflect back to all of this work that they did for us, that we now be there for them. With that also said, I'm going to tell you, thank you. I'm going to tell you a story that I talked about, that there was two trans women in Vancouver. One of their names is Gina, the other was Karen. Many of you will remember Karen Moore because she served as vice president of the International Court Council under Jose and as well under Nicole's council. I believe she joined your council as well. They wanted to run together and they wanted to be co-monarchs. And not only that, they embraced the fact that they were both trans women. They embraced the fact that they were both prostitutes. As a matter of fact, they both won, and their theme was Hello from the Streets. Gina was one of the most popular empresses ever to reign in Canada, and Karen was probably one of the most productive monarchs who helped found the International Court Council and served with great things. But at the time that they were running, because they wanted to run together, one had to run for emperor and one had to run for empress. Now, Gina ran for empress, Mama Karen ran for emperor. Imagine you having your gender life, your gender journey in your life be about being she and Karen, and your own organization mandating that you had to be recognized as he or his majesty. It's unfortunate. Karen embraced that. It was a decision Karen made, but imagine if Karen didn't have to make it. Well, last year, our monarchs in Vancouver introduced something that I know has confused and scared a lot of you, but I'm just going to tell you about it just so you see the perspective. We have a title, an additional title called Emprex. You still, when you run in Vancouver, you must run on the emperor or empress line. But if you win, you can decide if I were to run tomorrow again, I would not. If you hear that I have, you know that I've snapped my tether. But you have the choice. If you're elected, I would run on the empress line. But if I was elected, I would have the opportunity to reign as empress or emprex. So we have just taken the gender out of it. It's not a third title. It's not a special trans or non-binary title. It's just the option. Can you imagine, had that been there then? Back in 1986, Mama Karen de Vandervoort could have chosen to be emperor or could have been empress and not had to make a modification or an allotment just to fit in. So I know a lot of you have asked about that. That's the best explanation I can give. Karen's no longer with us, but God bless her. So with that said, and don't worry, I borrowed that from my Canadian time earlier to say that little spiel, so we're still on track. So please welcome, and I think that this is, I'm really looking forward to this. Please put your hands together, who's someone who's going to come up and speak to the transgender experience, Empress Danielle Logan. There you are.
Why, thank you, sir. I became a woman in Canada. I took advantage of the exchange rate. The one thing that they did not do properly in Canada was the lips. I had to go to Bangkok and have my lips redone. Not talking about these lips, kids. Probably more information than you ever want to know. I would also like to introduce a couple of people in the audience who are going to help me during the question and answer portion. That's Emperor Kaleo from Hawaii. From San Francisco. Being transgender in the court system is not easy. 30 years ago in Omaha, Nebraska, as I was transitioning, I became Empress 8 of Omaha. Of course, you know, I had to, at that time, wear an article of male clothing, even as when I started dressing as a female. Omaha was such a rough place that I had to live as a boy during the day, and I could go home and be myself. In the court system, of course, I wasn't understood. Well, today I'm still not understood. But it's gotten a little bit easier over time. You know, I'm going to talk about something that happened to me when I lived here on the continent. And it's something that a lot of trans people are scared of in the court system. If they run for a title, they will be attacked. That happened to me. But it made me a better person. It made me realize I don't have to be here, but damn it, I want to be here. I want to help my community. So we're going to take this back to a little bit more of a basic level, because there's a lot of misunderstanding still out there about the transgender community. You know, how do we support the transgender people in our life and in our court? How do we be a good ally? Well, first of all, I'm sorry to say there is no way to be a perfect ally. There are some handouts that are floating around the room that have a little bit more information about what I'm speaking about. The presentation had to be watered down because of time constraints. You don't have to understand someone's identity to respect it. There is no one right way to be transgender. What works for me may not work for someone else. Some people choose medical transition, and some don't, and that's completely fine. People need to be happy with themselves, and they need to live their truth. We also have another group of people within the trans community. I shouldn't say group of people, but we have other members of our family. And you know, when people refer to our trans community, they always say trans brothers and sisters, but we're going to correct that here, and we're going to correct that now. It's family. As we see the non-binary individuals becoming more and more prevalent in our courts and in our societies, we need to remind ourselves that sometimes putting a sexist term to like brother, sister, putting that label on something like that can be offensive to some members of our community. And we need to move away from that. Non-binary people are nothing new. Some people, but not all non-binary people, undergo medical transition or medical procedures to make their bodies more congruent with their gender identity. Most transgender people are not non-binary. Oh, and I forced the Queen Mother off the stage. Being non-binary is not the same thing as being intersex. Now, how to be respectful and supportive of non-binary people? I'm a little nervous, sorry. I used to drink, and then I could be in front of a crowd really easily because I didn't care. But now, this is important stuff, and it's very passionate to me, so I'm a little nervous. I want to make sure that I get it right. How to be respectful and supportive of non-binary people. You don't have to understand what it means to someone to be non-binary to respect them. Use the name a person asks you to use. Try not to make any assumptions about a person's gender. If you're not sure what pronouns someone uses, ask. I tend to use female pronouns. I embrace my chosen binary. Advocate for non-binary friendly policies, not only in the world, but in our court system. Understand that for many non-binary people, figuring out which bathroom to use can be challenging. I hope Nicole doesn't have any issues. Sorry, I had to. Talk to non-binary people to learn more about who they are. One of the biggest things is fear of the unknown. Once you deal with that fear, once you know something, you can embrace it. You can encourage. A couple of, and like I said, this had to be watered down tremendously. It's probably a 30-minute presentation, and I had to water it down so that we could also have a question and answer portion. A few quick reminders. You can't always tell if someone is transgender simply by looking at them. There is no one way for transgender people to look. Continue to educate yourself. Because in this country right now, you're not going to get it. We are the them. The transgender community is the them. We are the evil ones. Ask my ex-husband. Hey, I did what I had to do, right? Interacting with our transgender family. How does the court system become more gender inclusive? One thing is you can learn a person's pronouns, should they prefer pronouns. If not, adjust to non-binary terms. Create space on name tags for those who would like to include theirs. Space on application forms for pronouns, not preferred pronouns. Conduct training for court members. We have a wealth of individuals who are willing and skilled in conducting trainings, and maybe even someone in your local community. With the modern technology that we have, you can always Skype someone in to one of your court meetings and have a training. Try moving away from binary language, especially on the microphone. Maybe use something along the lines of fellow courtiers and guests. Never, and I hear this all the time in our court system, and quite honestly, it's very offensive. And it's the reason why some of the trans community does not come back to our events. Never make fun of trans or non-binary genders. We are not something to be made fun of. Introduce a third gender line or a non-gender line. Never assume that trans people belong on this line. I take my hat off to the Canadian community because they're far more advanced than we are in this country when it comes to dealing with trans and non-binary. Make it clear that the ICS is gender inclusive. Make it clear in all advertisements that the event is gender inclusive. Local chapters, excuse me, I just got tongue-tied there. Local chapters add a gender inclusivity statement on your websites. Create awards given in your local communities. In Hawaii, I created an award that is awarded every year. It's only a couple of years old now, but it goes to those who enhance the lives of transgender individuals. It can go to a business, an organization, an individual. And it seems to be well received in our community. Issues. If you have issues in the court system, if you are trans, non-binary, even for other, for the regular cisgender folk in the community, we have a court ethics commission that you can contact. We have a court. Hello? Oh, I guess I forgot how to use something big and black. Oh my God, I need more batteries. Okay, sorry about that. I can drain a battery. Not in that way. It takes a lot to look this good. We have a court communications group. There are different cases that they will hear, and they will give recommendations to the local chapter. Reach out to your local AIR if you need to contact these organizations, these groups or these commissions that we have in the ICS. You can contact me directly via Facebook, or several people know how to get a hold of me around the court system. We do have a couple of Facebook groups for the trans community. One is for allies, which is a little bit larger than the one that we have that is exclusively for the trans community. And the groups that we have on Facebook are, the one for the trans community exclusively is there so that we have some place where we can go and we can talk about the things that happen in the court system, things that make us feel good, things that make us feel not so good and not so welcome. The resources that I've used, and there's some resources out in your on your chairs. Unfortunately, there weren't quite enough. The printer kind of shorted me. The National Center for Transgender Equality is a great resource to do some self-education on transgender and non-binary. Mel knows who Mel is. If Mel is on the video chat thing there. Londa Lakes, Grand Duchess, thank you for being here. Kaleo from Hawaii, thank you. Queen Mother Nicole, thank you. Oh, you changed chairs. Something happened while I was giving my presentation. Thank you for recognizing the trans community and including the trans community. It's greatly appreciated. There's some cards like this floating around the room. These are cards for the group, the Facebook group. And it gives, some basic outlines on the back. We have had a few people that have been kicked out of the group, especially the trans exclusive group. We had a couple of smellers get in. If you don't want to know what a smeller is, talk to me later. It's someone who, back in the day, and this is probably an archaic term, and I hope I don't offend anyone, it's called a tranny chaser. Okay? So I see a lot of heads, yeah. And we also have one for the allies, which is very good. A lot of information gets posted there, and I invite you all to join. At this point, we would like to open it up to some question and answer. Londa and Cleo, if you could come up to assist with this portion. Questions, comments, concerns?
Hi again, Emperor 43 of Salt Lake City, also the second trans Emperor of Salt Lake. I have a question. I've chaired our Trans Week for the past few years now. And what that is it's a week dedicated to our Trans Fund, which is a fairly new fund. We also have our Cancer Week and our AIDS Week. So we have 3 different weeks dedicated to these 3 different funds. one of the things I've realized doing this the last few years is the lack of support for that specific week comparatively to the other 2 weeks. So I would just like maybe some advice on how to get our College of Monarchs and our membership more excited about that week, just as excited as they are about our Cancer and our AIDS week.
Well, to get people excited about the week, I would suggest I think everything happens through education. So if you want to, prior to the week that you're having to celebrate, start sending messages out about why it's important to participate in that week. Flyers through social media, email, things like that. And, just to let people know why this week is so special and why they should support it. And I think that if they are educated on it, they will be, more people will come. Yeah, I think one of the things too, like I noticed is that lots of times people just are afraid to approach it because they just don't know as much about it and they don't want to offend anybody. So most of the presentations I do, they're afraid to even ask questions because they don't want to offend me. So just creating that safe space for them to even ask questions, because sometimes people who are transgender, there's a history, that comes before when you come out. And sometimes when people do things, and especially safe spaces, like our court system, I think that it hits us really hard, like it stabs us. It may not be offensive to other people, but for certain individuals, it does. So I think another thing too is to practice empathy and understanding. And please don't use tolerance, because I don't think anybody wants to be tolerated in this room, right? So try not to use tolerance.
I think also that the statistics about trans, about the suicide, about, sad to say, this is the most difficult time for trans, about this administration and the military, how they're trying to erase. I think you have an opportunity now more than ever in your fundraising. Just even I would put, they're trying to erase us, as this administration is. And I think if you focus on that, people realize, oh my God, because some people to this day don't really even realize what is going on, and that our brothers and sisters are being attacked and being a priority of this administration to act like, and to erase it, don't exist. And the suicides and the murders alone. And it's interesting to notice not only in the United States. I think you all know that there's immigrants at our borders, and they are not just, they are also our brothers and sisters. 100 of them. Terry has been down there, and you all through that Tijuana AIDS Fund, and so we were able to make a contribution, all of you, on your behalf, $10,000 to help our GLBT sisters and brothers here. The horrific stories that the trans are telling us from South America and Latin America and all around the world. It's not just in the United States. Those statistics are there, I believe. And if you educate your community, this is, remember when we used to say, AIDS equals death, the truth is, in many places, being trans does equal death in these countries. And so I think giving that information about these times are serious for our brothers and sisters, I think that they'll be more hopefully respond.
I have a concern. In Orange County, it's a very difficult community where it is hard to reach out to the trans community, our brothers and sisters. And there are some that have been referred and have called me or asked me if I could help them. And I do, and I reach out, and from makeup to clothing to such. And they'll come in and they're headstrong and they want to be appreciated and recognized and respected. And we go out of our way. And me personally, we had a situation this past year where we did reach out to somebody, and they actually started becoming very political, where they were actually anti-gay marriage. they were posting things where it got to a point where some of our own court members were being offended and were pulling away from our organization because I was fighting to keep this person in and to accept and say, look, give her a chance. She's transitioning. She's trying to belong. She's trying to be accepted. And the more that I pushed to support her, the worse it became. And we had to actually sadly remove her because it got so volatile. And we couldn't take the chance, you know, there's the good and there's the bad. And with all of that, what's the best way to handle it? We didn't know at that point. It got to a point where it escalated and it was becoming a legal situation where she was going to come at us because she felt we were being discriminatory at that point. Everybody was entitled to their views and we respect that. But when it involves the organization and starts tearing it down piece by piece, there's a sense of protection. And so at what point and what would you suggest is the best way to handle that other than what we did?
Well, first of all, the trans community is very sensitive. And there are a lot of people in the trans community who will go as far as to, I tend to use the word trans, okay? I've been corrected several times, transgender. And this is by trans individuals. We have to be more sensitive to each other. You know, it's recently the Queen Mother put out a statement about you know, things that are happening in this country, and to the trans community. I shared it on my page. Excuse me. I shared it on my page. Immediately, the posting was attacked by some individuals because the Queen Mother said trans brothers and sisters. They felt that, you know, the trans community that she was putting them in a box, okay? Yes, we do need to use terms that are more inclusive, like family. Move away from those things that put us into boxes. But as far as this individual is concerned, Tara, you know, if they tell you, if they show you that they don't want to be involved, don't force them to be involved. Don't continue to push. Let it happen. When someone like that, you know, look at what's happening in our countries. There are a lot of gay folk who are behind Trump, okay? To me, that's just as devastating as a trans person who's against gay marriage. So, you know, you did what you had to do. You know, not everyone's going to fit in this organization. That person obviously was not a good fit.
She wanted to be involved and she wanted to do everything she could, but then she started to become oppositional and it was safe to a point.
Wherever you go in this world, there's rules we have to play by. Okay? She didn't want to play by the rules. Sorry. Get out. You know, I hate to be so direct, but you know, if you're going to be that detrimental to a group, maybe it's not the group for you. So.
I hope people are listening out there.
I think one of the things that I'll add is one of the things that Danielle said very early on is that individual, and I think you should treat everyone as an individual. And you have to think about how you would have treated any other court member and treat them accordingly, not to coddle them or, you know, I know everybody wants to be inclusive, but at the same time, there comes a point where you also have to look and use discernment as to, is this person good for our organization, or are they just going down a path that's going to take us into this really big quagmire?
Two more questions.
Hi, my name is Molly Mormon, I'm number 25 from Cincinnati. I just actually had a thought. I actually grew up in Salt Lake, and I work for one of the largest companies in the world. I work for Kroger, so if you're local here in Las Vegas or in the Midwest, it's Smith, Southwest, it's Rouse. I work for a very large company that employs almost 500,000 people. And I didn't understand the importance of the work that we need to do as allies to the trans community until it became something that I was intimately close to. And that's when I was Princess, my Empress is a trans woman. And having her experience and being a friend and an ally to her is what truly opened my eyes to understanding how important my role as a white cisgender male and the role that I can play in supporting the them that we've discussed. And for me, playing that role not only led to how can I support my
court in Cincinnati, but how can I have a broader impact in the world around me? And I work in HR, and we worked for years as an employee resource group of the GLPT associates at Kroger to get trans benefits. And we were fighting over and over and over again, and then we were told that it just wasn't in the cards. And it wasn't until I was able to take that perspective and realize, how do I get the allies in my company, including the officers of the board, getting vice presidents, those who had no experience with a trans person, and sitting them down in a room having a panel discussion where they could actually learn and grow from those trans individuals, that we didn't get the buy-in, and then within a year we got full health benefits for our trans associates. And when I think about what you're asking for your individual courts, how do we get buy-in to support that community? I think what really is truly important is getting ourselves out there and finding a way to get that message from the people as an ally, as an advocate on their behalf, out in front of them. So you need to find a champion to go out and say who is going to recognize, who will be recognized in your community, who can fight on their behalf, and then bring in that support and that fundraising there. So that's just what I was thinking that would be helpful.
Yeah, I did have a little question. I have something to add that I think white men in my age category, 30, and my wife is 27, we really don't know what to say. So I'm so grateful that of all people, you stand up and tell us. And then the magazine that was given to us in the plastic bag had 3 articles I read that were absolutely wonderful. And what's going to come up in the future, I believe, and it's already come up. I stood at the door of one nightclub and called the person by the gender name, you know, because if you're in a dress, I think that you're probably a girl or a drag queen, and get really reprimanded hard. Really, really hard, and I felt so dumb. But nowhere near as dumb as I felt after spending the whole weekend in Hawaii with him. His promise to tell you him, because I didn't realize that he had changed at all, and that he was I didn't know. And I said on stage thinking, boy, you are one big dumb hillbilly. You know, because why didn't I figure it out? But I didn't know about you either, and I told you that. You thought that was kind of a nice thing, because you do. I don't know what to say. You know, at my age, I really, truly need to learn a lot more about transgender. That's all there is to it. And if it wasn't for this organization, I would just be that big dumb hillbilly.
We're going to wrap up with 2 more questions. Yeah, so yes, all of you got this magazine. It's the best magazine. This issue is on transgender, and it is page after page. It's in your welcome package, Helen, make sure. So there's a whole issue on trans issues, on the community, everything. I just let you know.
The key is, I'm sorry, the key is education. Educate yourselves. Talk to, reach out to trans people in your community. Find out how they feel. Find out, you know, it's right now, there's so much information out there that we should all be rogue scholars by the end of this.
Hi, I'm Empress of Salt Lake City, biggest star. I'm lucky to be married to my husband and my emperor, who is our second trans emperor of our court's history. We have a long history of trans women empresses, which is great. As he kind of talked about earlier, our court has a struggle with the education piece. For the last 3 years, we've run an education panel, and even just along kind of more along like a broad spectrum with the court, how do we come to this education piece if people aren't necessarily willing to learn? Like, kind of for an example, earlier this weekend when somebody was discussing the bar tour, I overheard them say, oh, well, one of the bars is a tranny bar. And that's not an okay expression, you know, and to anybody that knows somebody that's trans, that's just not okay. So how do we,
when I had this conversation, I said, hey, we don't really look like, that's not a term that you should be using anymore. They just kind of rolled their eyes and walked away. Like, how do we combat that kind of attitude? Like, I know education is a big piece, but what can we do?
Well, first of all, I think, and I'm glad you brought that up, because in my day, when you were called a tranny by someone in the community, that meant that you had arrived, you looked good, you were passable, okay? It wasn't until the hate mongers, people like that, made it a bad word, okay? Be delicate with that situation. People are gonna roll their eyes, people are gonna be people. We just have to kind of dust it off at times. It gets tiring after a while. There's days I go home and I cry because, people just don't want to understand is what it seems. And then the next day, everybody understands. It's just kind of a hot and cold thing. As far as the education piece, all you can do is self-educate, offer education in your local core communities. Your LGBT centers should have someone who can come out, do some education for you. The more people who become educated in our communities on transgender issues, non-binary issues, the less we're going to see of what you're talking about.
Good morning. My name is Dulcie Cobwebs. I am Ember 2015 in Connecticut. I'm a non-binary identifying individual, and my title actually has Her Majesty within my title. My question for you is, when I show up at a coronation, I show up in a tuxedo, and everyone looks at me and automatically assumes he, and I get the titles of brother, things like that. What is your suggestion on how we break the automatic assumption that, my clothes will fit what are you underneath?
That's a tough one. I'm sorry, but it's a very good question, and it's a very tough question. Because I know a lot of people become frustrated because of those terms, because of those exact situations. And it drives people away after a while. And that's where we, as a community, an LGBT community, we have to become more sensitive to our own, okay? The pronouns that I use are going to be completely different than the pronouns that any of these folks over here use, or even these folks over here, or that gentleman sitting in the fourth row. So we have to be more sensitive to that. Ask people, if you don't know, ask them, how would you like to be referred to? And that's just something that we're going to have to start doing. Gender is taking on a whole new meaning in this country, okay? And that's something that, for some of us who are a little bit younger, it's something, the baby boomers, once the baby boomer generation has gone away, I think you're gonna see a lot more changes, but we have to try and educate the baby boomers as well, because half of the baby boomers don't even understand their own gender. So, once again, it goes back to education.
Yeah, but the younger generation needs to be respectful of the older generation and what we've been through.
We don't mean any offense, and I've been through it. In my day, it was transsexual, preoperative, postoperative. That is where many of us come from. Queer, we got the shit knocked out of us. Many of us don't like that name and don't like the label, but we are respectful that other people in different generations like the Q word. But be respectful for us and our journeys and where we come from, and that it's gonna take us a while. What I love Terry just whispered, he goes, I have learned so much today about that. It's a continued learning experience, and some of us are very old and set in our ways. We don't mean to be offensive. We don't mean to say, I still go crazy with, what is it, they, them, thou. I don't understand it still. I am trying. All I'm asking is be patient with us as we are accepting of the changes that you want and your generation.
And now
And now I have to be really offensive and move us along to the next topic.
So I want to thank Danielle, Kaleo, and Linda. Thank you so much. That last question was very educational, and I'm really glad that we did it. I also want to thank other folks who taught me about gender here, Karina, Julia Legaspi from San Diego. I actually identify as a non-binary fan, and I'm about to change the gender marker on my driver's license this month, which I'm very excited about. So I'm so glad we're having this topic, and we're going to now move into how to make coronations shorter with your hostess, Jody.
Okay. First of all, we are not going to litigate whether or not coronations should be shorter. If you feel that coronations are perfect the way they are or should be longer, put your hand up now. One. Bless you. Bless you. Okay, two. So with that understanding, if we assume for a moment that the collective feels that coronation should be shorter, the purpose of this is not to litigate that, but to express ways in which you have found that you and your courts were able to do that. We're going to do this as a lightning round, where you basically have 3 seconds to get your point across. For example, Vancouver, flip dias for walks, people walk into the audience much faster, MCs can roll out the names and you don't look at putts. That's one thing. Was that 10? I think it was 4.5. But if you can just do a lightning round, what is a way, put your hand up, I'll come to you, what is a way that a coronation can be shorter?
Fewer commands.
Fewer commands.
Cut all the unnecessary protocol titles.
Limited protocol, edited.
Stand and wave.
Stand and wave.
We cut out all of our extraneous awards, did them at a different event.
Some courts do their awards the night before, 2 nights before, Dick. Better bold MCs. Jason?
I actually like what you guys did last year. You made the command show a separate event.
Yes, for those of you wondering, Monarch stepped down at about 9:30, commands are all after.
Don't take breaks. Let people come and go as they choose.
No dance breaks, where they were never dancing for 30 years in my city. Hello. Follow a script and an agenda. Yes, please. Anybody else? I'm coming. I feel like Phil Donahue.
Performers are ready, just move on.
Performances, yes, a professional environment for performers and those MC. Anyone over here have some ideas?
Do the walk at the end of the night.
Do the walks at the end of the night. There's also New York style, where everyone starts on the stage and everyone is introed in. Or as I said, the reverse dice, where monarchs sit at the front of the room, courts all come out and then walk towards. Anyone else got some ideas? Did we get everybody? Oh, no, okay. I'm gonna get the steps in today.
Less tipping.
Less tipping. Okay, we all laugh, but you know what? Bring a stranger to a coronation and have a performer that you can't see because the group of people is blocking them to hand them $1. They will tell you that's ridiculous. I promise you they will. Yes?
That we do away with salutations. Like, I can't believe that people go, I want to congratulate Emperor this and Empress that for a good year, and then go up, when you go up, say, it's been a good year. But then also, if you want to advertise your coronation, put in the program. Oh, we invite you to, all that takes too much time.
And please make sure the production numbers stay to their time limit, not go beyond it.
Stick within time frames.
In the back, Jenny.
I'm a go.
Come on, Sally.
I would say start on time and then limit your speeches to 5 to 10 minutes.
Did you have your hand up?
I'm coming. She's agreeing. Start on time. One last walk song. Obviously, enforcing the one title, one walk rule, unless someone has been elected twice to a different realm, because if you've been elected to monarch in more than one city, gosh, you deserve to be mentioned. What were we going to say?
Is there going to be a list of all these suggestions?
I believe that the entire process is being recorded.
The survey.
The survey, but I believe also that we are taking information down, so all of this will be.
So the suggestion that Queen Mother gave regarding
salutations?
Yeah, the salutations. I mean, if we do that, I don't want it to be rude. Can it be known that we are choosing to limit our salutations and not do that so that we don't offend the people that we're coming to see?
I would say that the quick answer to that is you start at the beginning of your ball and do a collective salutation to the monarchs so that people understand that it's a change in the culture, so that you don't have to say that. But it's a very good point.
Not only that, you have a very good point. In San Diego, we say in the beginning that the information you get,
we say, no Levi's allowed unless dress leather or something like that. You know in advance, so what you say is, no salutations, one walk. San Francisco, we all know, even before we get there, one walk with title. So the secrets that you won't offend anyone is, we are gonna do our coronation the following way. Hopefully after this conference, people will start picking that up and say, one walk, one title, no salutation. And that way, no one will get offended because they'll know when they get there, and then make sure your MC's protocol follow that.
Okay, we're gonna take lightning round, we're gonna take 5 more, and then we're gonna get out the door here.
Whether it be command performances or candidate performance, when the tipping stops, stop the music.
Yeah.
I'm not going to agree with that one myself, but I think that's up for discussion. I don't think you interrupt people's performances, and just because someone's not getting tipped doesn't mean they shouldn't be able to do a song. But that can go back to, make sure what's the time we've allotted. If you say your song's 3 minutes, 42 seconds, and that's been allotted for by the monarchs, you get 3 minutes, 42 seconds. But every round is different.
Limiting when you're giving out your awards and your scholarships, maybe do it in the very beginning when you have your guests that have never been to a coronation, give them out, because that's really what they're there for, is to receive those acolytes.
Right, so the more formal spoken word parts, do it earlier while people are fresh. And you can also, many rounds also have awards banquets, or do it at sometimes during the Imperial Week as well. Right, okay, that's great. These are all very good suggestions, by the way.
Only currently reigning members of courts walk.
Only currently reigning members. Shame. It's an idea. Woo, shit, did you hear that? I think I overlooked tequila. No more than 3 games.
Oh, I love that. They're getting real long.
Thank you.
Okay, and 3 second last one.
This looked a little bit longer than 3 seconds, only because this has been a big contention on Facebook for at least 6 months now. So the protocol thing. So we are all honored, and Your Majesty, Queen Mother and I have had this conversation many, many times, the Double Eagle Awards and the Greg Lucci Awards and all that stuff. But that's something that has been really poignant on Facebook lately, is why do those all have to be announced every time for every person? My suggestion would be that the reigning monarchs are the ones who get their titles. I'm a past monarch, so when I'm introduced, I should be Empress 2, Destiny Childs, and that's it. Walk on and walk through all these AB Wicked Glamour Diva of the East, and I like noodles and fried chicken because I like Urban and Boys Empress. There's no point in all of that. Only the reigning monarch should have those titles announced.
It's an absolute fact in entertainment. For those of you who work in the entertainment industry, You have about 10 seconds to make an impact as a person. From the time you're announced, to the time you walk, to whatever's going on there. And once you get beyond Her Most Imperial Sovereign Majesty, Deity Delights, and that, in that moment, once you stretch it beyond, it's the moment's gone.
You know, I agree, because I'm honored when you guys mentioned the awards I'm giving you, but New York has really done, and I noticed some of the Eastern courts are doing this. In your program, I think everyone, you know how they put an individual picture of all the court members, and under their pictures, they say what awards or titles they are. So it is in the program, it's their picture. I think we need to do, I think it's more respectful of our court members by putting their pictures like a high school program. Then under it, you put their titles and you put the awards they got. That way everyone can look and see and move on.
And I think you'll agree with me here. We don't all need to put Nicole's name in our protocol.
No.
We know who the Queen Mother is. We know she loves us. We know where her grandchildren is. Make it all about you.
I like what Justin said. You don't all have to put the awards you've gotten, because it does take long.
It also can help create focus. For example, tomorrow night, the only thing in mind is the 20-year double elected, the 20-year celebratory empress, because I want people to come to my double decade. If I put a bunch of other stuff in there, nobody's going to hear or care. Okay, who has one really, really outstanding, one fabulous way to shorten coronations to end this? No pressure. Anybody? Come on, Jason.
Just because everyone seems to be so offended about the tip thing, remember Mama Jose actually proclamated that there should be no tipping in coronations, period.
Thank you. I think we'll have all those ideas, and thank you for everyone for participating and for playing along with the game. Keep it short and sweet.
Let's
All right,
let's hear it for Phil
So Jody, handed out real quick, so all that stuff that you just touched on is on the survey that we asked you guys to sit on. Please fill that out and leave it at this table before you leave. Second, we will also have the survey available for you after this session, so if you have come up with some more great ideas, please make sure you go online and fill those out as well. We definitely want to try to turn this around with an actual list, and then we're going to challenge you guys to actually do it. Because it's great to come up with a list, but it's putting it into action is going to be the big challenge.
Where's it online?
It will be on, the survey will be online as soon as we're done.
But where?
The ICS Conference site.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Jody. Thanks, everyone. Let's give yours all a round of applause. All right, now we're going to move to talking about recruiting young people and generating new membership. Those are separate but connected conversations. And to talk about recruiting young people to our courts, Empress Kimberly Michelle Westwood and Emperor Paul Ashwin. And to lead us in the conversation around generating new membership, Rhonda Peterson.
Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for being here. My name is Rhonda Pacheco. I'm Vice President of the Board of Court of Seattle.
And I'm Kimberly Michelle Westwood, Rose Empress 60 of Portland, Oregon.
And I'm Paul Perisco, Rainier 44 of Seattle, Washington.
So I just want to share with you a quick story. And my topic is in relationship to generating new members. So many years ago, several years ago, I was asked if I would run for a title. And I first said, well, how can I do that? I'm a woman. And they said, what do you mean? I said, well, I'm not a drag queen. I can't do that. How can I do that? Everybody is male. And I was told, but you're a female, and you can run for a female title if you wish. So will you run? And so I did. And as we want to have new members, one of the things that we really need to recognize is that not everybody is as bold and bodacious as I am. Some people are quite timid. And we need to let people know that it's okay to be who you are and come and be with us. And it's really also important that we open our arms and we let people know who we are and we share with them who we are and why we are. Because for myself, I have a really interesting story. I'm not an L, I'm not a G, I'm not a B, I'm not a T, I'm not an A, I'm not a B, I'm not a C, I'm an H. I'm a human. I'm married, I have children, I have grandchildren, and in my family, if you want to be in my family, you're going to be involved in the club. My husband's a treasurer. And also, a big question, there's so many things out there nowadays. When we started 50 years ago, 50 plus years ago, this really was probably one of the things that you could do to be involved in this community. And this community is my community. But now, are we relevant? Are we the only game in town anymore? We're not. We've got our HRCs, our ABCs, whatever else is, our sisters. How do we break the line and have people see that we are relevant? And that we gave away in the last 50 years, how many million dollars? $28 million? Yeah, we're relevant. So I will turn it over to Alex.
Good morning. Thank you all so much for having us, and thank you to Vegas for making it very difficult to wake up at 7 this morning and get into drag. I would first like to quote a great legendary woman. I believe the children are our future. Teach them well and let them lead the way. I do not own the rights to that song, so this can't go online. So in Portland, I think for youth, it's a very positive experience. We have the longest running LGBT youth pageant that ever is. It's called the Rosebud and Thorn pageant. And they are pretty much like the Emperor and Empress of the youth. And they represent an entire year. It is voted by the community as well. And they are the people that the youth can look up to that are in their own age range. We also have Leather and Lace, which are more geared toward people that identify just strictly as cis women, if they identify as a woman. But there are multiple people who are cis women who have won Rosebud and Thorn as well. I think a really important thing that we're trying to focus on in Portland is getting events that all ages can attend, because you don't have to have every event at a bar, and you don't have to just strictly focus on the 21 and older people, because all those people are going to be the next title holders in your community. I also think that me and Daniel do a really great job of supporting the youth as well as all of our title holders. We support our current Rosebud, Scarlett Fantasia, who just had investitures. She's going to be stepping down, and the Imperial Sovereign Rose Court are one of the people that help sponsor that pageant just so it can continue to go and keep running. And I think that the thing that when I started out is I didn't have the best jewelry or the best clothing. I came out in a Forever 21 sequin dress that was on clearance and just performed. And I think the Monarchs and all the seasoned people, we'll say, in our court system were very welcoming. And there are people still, yes, Helen, you. Very welcoming, and I think that is what we need to be to our youth. And also, if you're at an event, I don't feel that it is appropriate to be creepy to the younger generation. So if you see something like that, please first make sure that person is okay, and then possibly approach and address that situation to the person who might have been touching them inappropriately. And I also feel that accepting new drag, Drag is anything right now. It is growing, it is fabulous. You can be a bearded queen, you can be a titless queen, you can be a glitter bearded drag king, anything that you want to be. And I feel that accepting all of that female, yes, bitch, get it. I think that it is amazing that we, as a community, can accept all different types of people, all different types of performances. We may not get it sometimes, but you know, it was in their mind and it's their passion and we're here to support them. And our declaration that we made this year is gender is not an issue or a problem this year. You are who you are. You can be a female, quote unquote, title holder and wear pants. You can be a male title holder and wear heels and wear makeup, whatever you want to do, just as long as you express yourself.
Yeah.
I also want to point out that our newly elected, that we crowned a Prince and Princess Royal, were both youth title holders. Our prince was Thorn and our princess was Lace. So they grew up in the system of youth. And I went to the club in my underwear and danced with them all the time. And now being in the same reign as them, I feel is very wonderful. And I feel that youth are here to soak everything in like a sponge, and they want to honor and respect us just as much as they want to honor and respect back. So I feel if we love each other and respect each other, I feel more people will want to come in and join in on the fun, because if you're having fun, they get jealous on Facebook that you're out there and they want to join in too. Woo! So I'm going to start out with my story of how I got involved with the court system. I come from a small farm town, conservative town, farm boy. I know you would never realize that right here, right now, but I got involved. I started with Gay Seattle. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. I didn't know what it was. I had no idea. And what I found myself getting into was a sense of family, sense of inspiration. I traveled, I did a lot. I realized that this is a major organization that is something much bigger than me out there, and I wanted to support it. So then I was inspired to go on and do the Prince title, and was even more inspired to go on and do the Rainier title. Some of the things that I experienced as a young title holder, yes, there was the inappropriate creepiness, and I didn't know what to do. I had no clue what to do. And then I was told, you need to go to your Emperor and Empress. You need to tell them, have a voice, speak up. And if something's uncomfortable, say it. Don't be afraid to say it. I was open, my eyes were open to the transgender community. Coming from a farm town, I had no idea. I learned so many things. I experienced so many things. I've been so many places now that when I try to tell people the stories, I find myself having to educate them even more. And I get the, wow, you've done all this? You've been to these places? And it's like, yes, I'm part of this organization and we do amazing things. We do lots of great things. Lost my train of thought. The hard part is, sometimes I find myself looking for inspiration from other people who have had titles as well, so like from your monarchs. What I'm seeing is sometimes we have monarchs who want to be there and want to be involved, but sometimes they only tend to be there when asked to be there. What I've noticed in Seattle, at least, if you show up to one of your title holder shows, they're absolutely like baffled and they're excited to see you. So show up. That's inspiring to them. They look up to the older title holders, wiser title holders. And they need that guidance. I would not be here today doing what I am doing right now if it wasn't for the people that I've reigned with. This is, to me, an amazing thing, and I really wish that everybody would understand that this is something that our children and our youth are here and now need to know about so that we can continue this for years to come. Now, the big question is, what can you do to get your youth involved? And there are plenty of ideas. I think a great one is lowering covers to different events so the youth can go to an event. Or even sponsoring the youth. I know in Portland, we have the lovely Suzanne. She sponsors an entire table to coronation so all the youth title holders can go and afford a $65 ticket to coronation. And I also feel that just being able to open and accepting non-binary people, let them know that you are here to listen and you're here to respect them as well.
Yeah, being locked into a place of male or female title is really interesting. I was Prince, I was the lipstick prince, and I went wherever I wanted to go, wearing whatever I wanted to wear. And I always represented the Port of Seattle in a very responsible way. And I feel that the next prince, whether he is whoever that is, should have the freedom to show up exactly the way they want to show up as well. We have a question.
This is more of a really statement, really. My name is Alana Asian, and I'm a Crown Princess from San Diego. I have also been active duty military for nearly 20 years. I've served under Gomez Motel, and since the repeal, there is an untapped resources within your military community, within your community. I have young, gay, well, not just gay, but all aspects of the LGBT community that are stationed with me, that come to me because they know that I'm gay. And they have questions. They want to know about the history of our community, but they don't know where to turn. So I highly encourage you that if you're looking for new membership and fresh faces, please seek out in any way that you can the military personnel that are within your community. Because not only does it help them with volunteer aspects in their community, it helps you bring in new faces, new ideas, new people to your court systems. And we get to pass on the knowledge about our community, about the imperial court system, to new faces who will end up one day hopefully leading our organization. So just in that aspect, a suggestion for everyone to take away. Thank you. Two more questions. So there.
Hi everyone, I'm Emperor Eugene 49 of Los Angeles and Hollywood. Hi. I have a question that is very relevant towards this topic actually. We've been trying to bring new members to the court. If anybody has real suggestions about approaching gay community, because what we're dealing with mostly is the young generation doesn't know what court is. And each time when we have an event, some new people coming to our events, but it's hard to actually get young people involved because what Hollywood has a mentality that, well, you know, it's hard to bring them to do anything actually except go clubbing. I mean, they only want to have fun and that's it. And considering that what we're doing is very important to all of us, how do you practically, what do you do actually to bring young new members to the court? Thank you.
So one of the things that I would do is, you said it, they want to come and have fun. Let's make it fun. Let's make it an inviting, fun environment where you, whoever you are, can show up exactly the way you are and be wanted, respected. That's what everybody wants. And we have to be inviting. A lot of courts say, or people say, we want new members, but yet that is like a 5-foot building wall that you have to break down just to get into the door sometimes. So we have to narrow that door down to nothing.
Hi, my name is Ginger. I'm the ICP from Washington, D.C. And two things that me and my partner are actually working on is within the school systems in the county that we live in. I'm actually gonna start working with their club that they have for the LGBTQ community. And the other thing is, our roommate is actually getting ready to foster her nephew. And the foster actually asked us to work with the youth and their family that are not accepting. So that's another way to actually reach out to the youth and the younger crowd is between the schools, and the fostering is gonna be a huge success, I feel, for that as well.
And we had the last one was here, actually. And then I'm sorry, we got to move on.
Hi, I'm Char Star from Portland. I was a princess a few years ago. My question is for Kim. When I was princess, I don't wear the big hair, I don't wear any fake nothings, and I got a lot of flack from more seasoned queens and courtiers who asked me, where's your jewelry, where's your hair, where's this? My question for Kim is, she's an up-and-coming drag queen who has all these great ideas and backwards heads and eyes on her chin. How would you educate younger people and people like me or someone else on the older generation to accept us a little bit easier? Does that make sense?
So how would I educate the seasoned? Yes. So I feel I would just talk to them. I would let them know, like, we all have to start somewhere, and if you have a problem with what they're wearing, help them out, talk to them, let them borrow something. If you feel you hate that they're wearing a short dress to coordination, just say, hey, I have this wonderful old gown that, you know, is still brand new that I wore once because I outgrew it or something. Donate it to them. I think as long as you are inviting, I know for me, I got involved just because I was asked, and you become invested. And if you can make a connection with somebody and get them invested in your reign, they'll want to continue with the court. And here I am, like 7 years later, still in the court, and it's still wonderful. So yeah, education is great.
Let's hear for our dynamic trio here. Your question about how to really is just going to play into our next topic, which my wonderful co-facilitator is going to tell you about right now.
Great, so thank you, Jenny. We are going to move on to talking about marketing and social media with Nathan Page and Petty Cash.
Just a little dolly. Good afternoon, everybody. Okay, so talk about branding. How many people in here are marketers by trade? A couple, okay, all right. If I say anything wrong, just tell me later. But what is branding? Branding has been around for as long as we've had products. So in 500 BC, when Nicole was sitting in a dark room creating rugs on her loom to take to the market and sell, she had a product. And then Lala started making rugs about the same time on her loom. And now you had Nicole's rugs and you had Lala's rugs. And now you had two different brands. And you had to figure out which one you wanted to buy. So brand has been around as long as there's been a product to buy. We've heard a lot in the last couple of decades about personal branding. And I can tell you that one person who has executed this better than anybody else in the world is Oprah. Everybody hears the name Oprah and they know what the brand stands for, right? Okay, so what we want to do is share a little bit of knowledge today to get your courts up to the same level, maybe not quite as big as the Oprah brand, but kind of on the same track. So what is a brand? Brand is a combination of properties that describe the product. They describe the experience, they describe what the product is, and in a really good brand, it's synonymous with what your product is like. So for example, Cheerios. Cheerios is not a product, Cheerios is a brand. But when I say I bought Cheerios, you know what I bought, right? How many of you asked if you can have a 2-ply facial tissue? And how many of you asked for a Kleenex? Kleenex is the brand, but when you ask for a Kleenex, you know exactly what you're gonna get. And Q-tips. Everybody in this room knows what I mean when I say, can I have a Q-tip? I didn't ask you for a little piece of cardboard strung at the end. So why do you choose the brand that you do choose?
And sorry, this is a little bit of a brand 101, so we're back in college for just a minute. So characteristics of the brand: relevancy, consistency, and credibility, just to name a few. The image and the identity. Slide. Sorry.
I got you.
All right, good. You're gonna keep up with me. So ultimately, the brand image, the brand identity, this is how the organization wants to be seen by the public and how the public sees the organization. So back to the Cheerios example. Why do you choose Cheerios, slide, and not, slide, the off-brand? You what? All right, just keep, okay. So ultimately, you've got the same product. Now, there are a couple of reasons why you're probably picking the Cheerios. One is because they paid a lot of money to be at eye level in the store, and the generic product paid very little money to be on the bottom shelf. However, when you get right down to it, it's the same thing in both boxes.
I know, it's the biggest secret ever, right? Right? Earth shattering.
Slide. So how do you know which one you want to choose? It's the brand awareness. It's the extent to which customers are acquainted with the brand. It's also the brand recognition. So brand recognition being, what do you think of, what do you know, what do you feel when you see the brand? We're going to talk about the 5 most recognized brands in the world. Does anybody have an idea which one of them is? Coca-Cola, Tide, Apple. Only one of those is in the top 10. You Coca-Cola? Okay. Does anybody have a guess what the #1 recognized brand in the world is?
Church.
None of those are right. Number 5 is Mercedes-Benz. You see this logo and you know exactly what it is. Number 4, FedEx. Everybody in the world knows what FedEx is. Apple, number 3. McDonald's, number 2. And the most recognized brand in the world, Starbucks. Now, what's interesting is you can see a paradigm shift because 10 years ago, Coca-Cola was the #1 recognized brand logo in the world, and it's not even in the top 10 these days. So it's amazing how culture will shift and the brands and recognition will shift with the culture. I know, another mind-blowing moment, right? All right, so why do you choose the brand that you choose? It's all about the brand equity. Ultimately, it's all of those characteristics that come together and create brand equity, which is what you want in your brand for your court. You want to have equity in your brand for people to say, oh, that's a respected organization, that they mean this, they do that. All of that funnels into what brand equity actually is. Slide. Benefits of branding. Why do it? Customer recognition. You want a competitive edge in your market. You want loyalty from your membership and your supporters. And you want the enhanced credibility and ease of donating. So, and I love this image that's on this slide because it really does prove what branding can do for you. You're the one that stands out. You're the one that people know. So how does this affect you guys and affect your courts? Right now, how many of you have communities that are just full of other charitable organizations like the court, and you're actually struggling because it's, we only have so many dollars to give away. How do you make your organization stand out? Branding is a part of it. To make your court stand out, you need a couple of strong things. You need strong brand recognition, which comes from a strong name and a strong logo at the very minimum. And then you want to build brand awareness on what your brand is. So when someone thinks of what your court is, or somebody thinks of your name, or somebody thinks of your logo, they have an experience in mind to know exactly what you do and why you're doing it. And obviously you want that to be a positive image. Slide. So how do you do that? Building a strong brand. First thing is identifying what you want people to think when they see your brand. Do you want them to think that you're a bunch of regal queens who just run around town in gowns and crowns and do good deeds? Do you want them to think that you're a bunch of partiers? And I'm not saying that one way is better than the other, so don't take me the wrong way. But it's whatever you want your brand to be. Do you want to be very regal? Do you want to be fun? Do you want to be both? What is it that you want? Or is there some other definition that you want to conjure in somebody's mind? Figure out what that is and then create a mission statement for what your brand is. And ensure you have a logo that is representing what you are and what you want your brand recognition to be. Also create consistency with the brand. So use your logo consistently across materials. If you have somebody on your board who takes care of your publicity or your marketing, make sure that all the marketing is funneling through them. So that when somebody sees a poster or somebody sees material or somebody sees something on Facebook, they know almost immediately that there's some consistency throughout your collateral that they know, oh, well, that's the Court of Washington. Oh, that's the Court of DC. Or, oh, that's the Court of Las Vegas. I know them. So it's just being consistent across your brand. Don't have your logo in purple on some things, and then in yellow on some other things, and then there's some new logo that somebody created because they just thought that was fun. Just be consistent about it. Nathan's going to talk more about this, but build an easy-to-use website that represents who your identity of your organization is. So if, let's say, for example, your colors are red and yellow. These are your brand colors. Don't have a purple and green website and people go, what is this? I don't know. Where did I go? And then ensure that all the ambassadors of your organization are representing what your brand means. So if you've identified what you want your brand to represent, and you've identified a mission statement for your brand, make sure that your board and your college and your membership understand that this is what we want to convey, this is what we want the membership to understand, this is what we want supporters and people who don't know anything about us to get when they first see us. It's part of that recognition and building brand awareness. Slide. Make the information easy to find. So make sure your web address is easy to access. Make sure that you don't have ridiculous web domain names like the Imperial Sovereign Queen City Court of the Empire.org. Legit, our website is the isqccbe.org, and you should hear me try to explain that to somebody who's half cocktailed in a bar when they go, do you have a website? Yeah, just let me write it down. Or just go Google Cincy Court because you're never going to get it. So something that would be really easy. One of the things I want to do in our report is change it to cincycourt.org because it's going to be a whole lot easier to find. QR codes are another good example. There are a lot of marketers in the industry that will tell you that they have come and gone, and then they came back and they went away again. They're an underutilized tool, but they're a really great tool. And I'm on the boat of a very small group of people who are trying to bring them back again because how easy is it to hold your phone up at something, scan a code, and it takes you exactly to the website. Those, you can generate them online for free. They're super easy, and they know that they ensure that you're going to get the customer where you want them to be right away. Exactly, especially if your website is like ours. Make your pages simple to read and easy to find information. Nobody wants to go to a website that they can't find the information. They typically want to get there, get what they need, and get off. You know, that's really just a good life statement there too. And also ensure that your contact information is up to date. So, you know, make sure your Growler and your Grindr profiles are updated, as well as your website for your organization. People know how to contact you. Make sure that your email addresses are correct. Make sure that things are routing to the right folks. And make sure that you are timely and consistently answering the communications from people. Because if they say, well, I emailed them and they just never got back to me, you've lost the impression of that person. Slide. And then also engage your membership and supporters. So create Facebook events. Create posters for those events. There are so many apps now, so many programs now. They'll do Facebook cover photos. They'll do Facebook posters. They'll do Instagram posters. How many of you are guilty of just scrolling through Facebook and you really don't notice the posts that people write? You just see the pictures of the big bold colors. That's what everybody's doing these days. That's why Instagram is slowly taking over the world. It's all about the visual image. So create a quick thumbnail visual image. That's going to be the #1 way to attract your audience. And then also stay in contact with your membership. Stay in contact with your supporters. So even if it's a quick monthly blast, maybe it's just this little thing is going on right now, that little thing is happening. We used to do a newsletter in our court. We finally got away from it because A, it was a real pain in the rear to have to do, and B, nobody was sitting and reading a 12 or 15-page newsletter that, oh, this is just more junk. One of the things that our Reigning Empress is doing this year, though, is a quick, every couple of weeks, it's an email out to the membership. Hey, guys, wanted to thank you for your support. Wanted to tell you what's coming up in the next couple of weeks, and here's how you can get a hold of us. And as always, here's how you can donate to us. Slide. Talk about evolution of a brand. So you guys all have a logo right now, right? Is everybody happy with the logo that you have? Is everybody happy with the image that your brand or your logo portrays in your community? Yes, some are, some are not. So there's always opportunity for the brand to evolve. Starbucks is a good example. So starting in 1971, they came out with what looks like a mermaid with two tails sitting there drinking some coffee. They've eventually evolved that brand to something that's nothing more than a symbol. It doesn't even have their name on it, but you know what that is, and so does the rest of the world, since it is the #1 recognized logo in the world. The international court system is no different. Slide. So there should be one black and white logo? Okay, all right. Sorry, I can't see, so I'm taking your word for it. So the international court system, this is one of the very first logos that the ICS ever had. And this was actually branded for the International Court Council. Then we created another logo. And this one is a little bit closer to what we have today, but actually talks about the international court system. Took that one and evolved it into the seal that you guys are familiar with seeing. It's on the Facebook, on the website. This is the one that's been around for a while. It's on the medallions and so on. The newest iteration you guys have probably seen is the new International Court Council logo. And all this is just an updated version of what we've already had. So you can see as we progress through, the last three have been relatively similar, but it's just taking it and taking it to the next level. So creating more of an iconographic image out of the logo and just making it keep up with the times. And we're excited to introduce that we have another new logo coming. Slide. The International Court System. So we'll now have two logos that represent this fantastic organization. One that's for the International Court Council, which is the administrative branch, and then one that represents all chapters and all membership being the International Court System. We're still working on some of the tweaking with some of those, and we're still working on brand standards so that we can ensure we're being consistent with the way that we're branding. But overall, you'll start to see all of this and more consistent marketing as we move forward into 2019. All right, that was a lot of information. Any questions on branding?
We're going to limit this to 3 questions because we got to keep moving. So 3 questions specifically about branding. Anyone have a question about branding? Oh.
Don't I thought it was that good that no one had any questions.
Patty, give us the branding of the International Court System.
Give you the branding of the International Court System?
What would you say is our branding?
Our brand is something that is preserving our past and embracing our future through noble deeds and regality.
No, that ain't it.
Okay, second question right here, and then we'll go 3.
Real quickly, what's a good elevator pitch for who we are and what we do? It's a really great question, and to tell you the truth, I'm still working on that one myself.
But you know what I find works the best? If people don't know us, I go, where's the GLBT, the gay lesbian lesbian, Shriners or Outs or not? And they go, oh, because everyone knows who the Mooses, the Outs, and the Shriners, and they're kind of international. And so people will go, oh, so you do charity. So I think that's kind of the best way.
And that traditionally has been, but I will say that as the baby boomer generation and some of the older generations are dying off, not as many people know what the Elks and the Shriners are anymore either. So it's a matter of trying to come up with the next evolution. I myself have been guilty.
Why do I feel so old?
I heard it was described that we actively engage in studying forms of monarchy through active role-playing, philanthropy, and stewardship. I didn't make that one up.
Somebody write that down.
Okay, I think we're gonna get one more question, and then we're gonna get to the fun part for you, hopefully. Jason, I think yours was the last hand, is Genuine.
Hi there, my name is Genuine Butane. I'm Empress 25 of Tacoma, and also Miss New Oregon 45 of Portland, Oregon. Anyway, my question or statement really is more about, you talked about loyalty with the brand and why people are loyal to the brand. And the thing about the court system is that you have all these generations that have been a part of the court for years and years and years. And with that, you've had a lot of the younger generation that has come and gone because the generation has been there for so long that has maintained the loyalty and the brand of the court system, sometimes scares away those younger people from evolving that brand into what they want it to be. So how do you convince those younger generations to believe in the brand while still convincing the older generation or the wiser generation, however you want to say it, that the brand is still viable for them to still hold on to what they believe in and what they can trust for this organization to be, while still embracing what the future wants the organization to be as well?
It's a really, really good question. Cookie, can we roll back to the Starbucks slide, please? But I think this is a good illustration to what you're asking. So it shows